All right, welcome everyone to the December Medical Cannabis Policy Advisory Board meeting. I'm the board chair, J.D. Lauritsen, happy to have everyone here. Just want to read just a little something to you and then talk about our public comment procedures. So this meeting is being held virtually and is hosted by the Utah Department of Health and Human Services Center for Medical Cannabis based in Salt Lake City. This meeting was provided as required under Utah's open meeting laws and was posted on the Utah Public Notice website. In compliance with Utah's open meetings laws, this meeting is being recorded. A recording of this meeting will be posted to the Utah Public Notice website no later than 3 business days following the date of this meeting. A rough draft copy of the unapproved written minutes will be posted to the Public Notice website within 30 days. This approved minutes will be posted to the Utah Public Notice website within 3 business days after board. All right, so just want to talk about public comment and our instructions. Here's some general instructions. All public comment will be limited to 2 minutes per person. If you want more time than that, you must request it from the chair. The chair may accept or reject requests for additional time. Public comment period is not guaranteed every meeting. The chair has the authority to create or remove public comment period from the agenda or during the meeting. You can look over public comment guidelines that are posted on the Utah Public Notice. Please state your name and your affiliation when making a public comment so it can be reflected in the meeting minutes. Only comments made on items listed on the agenda will be considered. If you have a comment about an item on the agenda, as far as commenting over Zoom goes, the Zoom public chat will be disabled during Zoom meetings. And if you want to make a comment, you will need to fill out the comment registration form found on the public website. Chair will indicate when it's time for the public comment period. We'll determine when you return. Take 2 minutes to make a comment. Chair will then decide whether to take additional comments. Use the hand icon on Zoom to indicate if you'd like to make a comment. For those here in person wishing to make public comment, please sign in on the public comment sign-in sheet. It's located on the table to the far end of me. With your name and indicate what agenda item you want to make a comment. The chair will indicate when it's time for the public comment period. The board chair will call on you when it is your turn. You will come to the public comment table. Take 2 minutes to make your comment. Okay. All right. Well, with the welcome out of the way, I will turn to the second item of business, which is to approve the minutes for November 2023. Have all board members had an opportunity to review the draft minutes from any proposed changes? Okay, take a motion on the minutes.
I'm going to approve the minutes.
All right, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to approve the minutes for the November 2023 MCPAB meeting. Abby, will you take a roll call vote, please?
Nanette Berezny. Desiree Hennessy.
Yes.
Jimmy Higgs.
Yes.
J.D. Lauritsen.
Yes.
Matthew Page.
Yes.
And Misty Smith.
All right, that motion passes unanimously. Want to turn to item number 3 on the administrative business of the board. Just want to make sure everyone on the board is aware that the legislative session is soon. January. Don't know the exact start date. It's usually somewhere 18th of the month. That sounds about good. The date, don't know the exact date, but we will be continuing to meet, throughout the session. We may also have to, maybe if something comes up impromptu from the legislature or things that we have to act on, we may have to do that, but more to come. We will try not to upset the normal meeting cadence the best we can. But if the legislature and or regulators need input from us, and if we do have to meet out of a traditional time we have set, make sure that works. All requirements. But we do need to flexible during the legislative session that will run from the middle of January. So our meetings in January and February could be multiple meetings. But just please be willing to be as flexible as possible. I understand that we have lives and jobs, flexible time because that's true policy. Obviously, as a policy board. And of course, you know, if you do ever want to go attend, there's stuff. Meet them, meet them, or see how the process works. So I'm sure we'll see session. Okay, well, I don't know if there's anything more. Strategy sessions that we post or hold following the meetings are going to now be moved to the of the meeting. We haven't found a particular day. We've seen times that work for people. So
the only thing that ever between you and me is trying to
let you know exactly when that will be held, or when we'll have the strategy sessions, but they will be on the same.
Just been note JD that says she's had a little trouble hearing. Trying to, it's supposed to be India, but we can use our.
No worries.
Jimmy, can you hear anything? I was just wondering if Jimmy can hear, because JD, I'm getting like maybe every 10th word. Whatever you said, I'm sure it was glorious, but like I heard none of it.
Yeah, it's choppy for me also.
Same.
I can't hear anything. If you're talking to me, I can't hear anything.
Yes, can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
All right, and we can hear you too.
Right.
So, all right, well, we don't even probably go on with that. But yes, let's just be flexible during the legislative session, and then also our strategy. Anybody else have any other administrative business or they'd like to discuss? I guess I would like to ask you, Rich, one thing. Where do we stand?
We've got some individuals who are interested. We're just firming up exactly their availability a little bit more and then getting approvals from our executive office. So that's where we're at. We expect to have both positions filled by the January meeting.
Looks like we're still having trouble with that. Not sure. Des, can you hear us at all now?
I can hear, like when somebody looks at the speaker and talks directly into it, it seems to pick it up. But anytime there's any background noise or if you kind of trail off at the end of the sentence, like I hear nothing. I hope it's better for Kent and Jimmy, but right now I'm a little bit nervous about, you know, voting on stuff because I can hear nothing. I heard just fine last time. Is there a different speaker we could go get in a different room?
Probably not. Probably not.
We can try the room mics. That's what the mics are right now. We've switched from the owl to the.
Maybe adjust when each individual speaks, speak toward the owl mic. That I believe, based on what you said, that may make a difference. Yes, you can hear me clearly now.
I can
Yeah.
hear you okay right now, Rich.
So I know that's a pain, but for those participating in person here, you'll just look directly at the owl if you're speaking to the owl. But with your eyes, your mouth pointed towards the owl. That might, I'm thinking that will make a difference based on her feedback. And, but if you do not hear anything, Des, be the first one to let us know. And we
I
can-
always am.
we can make further adjustments, but I'm hoping that this adjustment will make it possible to make it so we can get through the meeting with people participating virtually able to hear. So.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, seeing that there's no more administrative business for the board, we can turn to the next agenda item, which is updates from both DHHS and NBM.
Yeah, just a brief update from DHHS. We now have 75,500 active medical cannabis cardholders in the program. That we're almost at our 4-year mark. Program starting in March 2020. So that's a milestone hitting that 75,000 mark. We also have 978 qualified medical providers registered by our department, and 12 new QMPs joined the program in the past month. That have been in the program previously. And then there are also 78 pharmacy medical providers, the pharmacists that work with the medical cannabis pharmacies, now registered in our program. Those are just some general statistics. Also, administrative rule amendments that have been discussed during the previous meetings. Those we held a rule hearing, and we were able to get those approved internally, and the deadline for public comment has passed, and we are on track to make it effective on January 1st, 2024. So just a few weeks here. So that is on the horizon. And also, as part of the launch of the University of Utah Center for Cannabis Research, the center will support 2 to 3 pilot awards with an amount of up to $50,000. So that is, those are funds that are partly coming from the appropriation of the revenues from the qualification enterprise fund that, and of course the revenues or the fees that are collected from our program go toward that fund. And then a portion of that is what is helping the University of Utah with these pilot awards. And the purpose of the grant is to encourage researchers to take a multi-dimensional approach to discover collaborative partnerships that support piloting innovative study ideas addressing many areas of cannabis research that are still outstanding in the field. And so what this is an invitation to eligible researchers across all of Utah's academic institutions to participate in submitting applications for the SEED grant program. You know, of researchers who may be interested, please draw their attention to the website of the University of Utah Cannabis Research Center, and that website is uvuhealth.utah.edu/Center for Cannabis Research. We can make sure that appears in the minutes of the meeting. And but the pre-application for submission for that funding is Friday, January 12th, 2024. That's when the application opens up. The deadline for submission is Friday, and decisions about who gets the money will be made in May. The funding will start in June. So I think that's an indication that things have moved forward since this creation of the University of Utah Center for Cannabis Research. We're delighted to see this move forward. Spread the word if you are aware of those researchers. Also, Trevor and I, we attended during the past month Cannabis Regulators Association member meeting. And I was able to moderate a session on the role of pharmacists in campus programs, which is very relevant to the way our program operates. Also, there's a few other programs across the United States that operate similar to ours. Play a role in centuries. And got some really good discussion that was just really substantive as we coordinated with other states on that topic and full attended as well. Legislative session begins Wednesday, January 17th, for that day, that goes until Friday, March 1st. And it's 45-day session. But we all know bills are being drafted now, prep for that. And we expect to, as a department, to provide input and also fiscal impact analysis on the bills that of course impact that program. And then I think everybody's familiar with how we are replacing the MJ Freeway system with the Salesforce platform, and we hired AST to configure that. That project is massive and it continues. Today it's on track to go live in spring 2024, and we're excited that we have some good partners in that. Really, I think will represent some opportunities for improvement with that system. And those are all the updates. Does any board member have a question about any of that? Okay. Thank you.
We will now turn to ULAB for their updates. Yep, Dr. Forsythe, please.
So it's not the technical renewal. Years in fact. That'll be coming up in February. System. Running. Right. Partners.
Maybe just updates on the rules. So RCC, testing on cannabis, which was discussed here this morning. A couple of months ago, big topics was seeds in flower. That has been published in the Utah State Bulletin as of December 1st. It's currently in its 30-day comment period. So more likely that will probably go into effect that first week of January. The R6840, which is our pharmacy rule, will actually just ended its comment period on December 15th. It should be going into effect, I think, actually December 1st. Department of Health with their pharmacy rules, and then the courier rules, which is R6841, finished its comment period on December 1st. It's ready to go and it's going to effect on January 1st as well. Rules up until
Okay, thanks, Cody. Thanks, Brandon. Appreciate it. Now we're ready to turn to topic number 5 on the agenda, which is medical cannabis qualifying conditions. I will turn it over to Trevor in a second, but just kind of wanted to explain where this kind of came from. Desiree Hennessy, who is a member of our board and is also the head of the Utah Patients Coalition, had reached out to me a few weeks ago. I know this is something that she works on all the time, not just recently. So she asked that it be put on the agenda, for discussion and a possible vote. Same with the with item number 6 on the agenda, which is in relation to dosage forms. So that's how this came to be. I also know that she's been in communication with lawmakers who were interested in the board's kind of take on things as well. So, Des, if you want to make any comments before Trevor starts his presentation, I think now would be a good time for you to make those comments. If not, we can have Trevor do his presentation, and then we can open up for discussion.
Yeah, if it's okay, I will make a couple comments just first. Let me go back to my screen here. I've lost all of you. So the reason for this, I think, is mostly the main reason why we're doing it. We started in the beginning with a very small conditions list. We did have some huge wins right out of the gate with our pain and our autism. Most states don't have autism first on their conditions list, and we're really proud of the fact that we got that. We also got pain lasting longer than 2 weeks, which has been probably I think Rich can say, but I think it's been the greatest condition used, right? And so if you have a lot of these other conditions that we didn't add to the list, you can still get in under the pain qualification. So, and then we were told that to kind of expect about a year moratorium on adding more conditions. Here we are, almost year 4, and we haven't added any more conditions. When I talked to Senator Vickers this year, he expressed interest in having the board vote on this before it got to them, just us vetting it and seeing what we thought. There's been a couple problems with that now that we have lost 2 of our medical professionals on the board, which is, I think, what they wanted to, mostly who they wanted to see vote on this. But I still think that it's worth a conversation, possibly a vote. What we are looking for is to possibly just expand the ability for QMPs and LMPs to be able to recognize in their patient a need and then recommend cannabis as they see fit. So whether that's going through conditions one by one, which could take a long time, or just adding a clause at the end of our conditions list that says, something like any other medical condition that is approved by a medical provider that they believe, can be benefited by medical cannabis or something. Trevor can touch on that a little bit more. I believe, is it Oklahoma or Pennsylvania has a clause like that? And so adding something like that, and if not, then maybe looking into starting to really approve different conditions. Like sleep disturbances is one of them that has been on our mind for a long time. And so anyway, that's, and I guess I should say again, it's the why, right? Like we have patients that are in the program that are absolutely using this for PTSD, but they didn't get it for PTSD because the way to get it for PTSD is so hard. We have patients that are using this for conditions that don't fall in here, for anxiety, depression, bipolar, where they're using it for genetic conditions. But instead of going and telling their doctors what they're using it for, they are saying it's, pain, which is real, which is true. That's what they're using it to, what symptom they're treating. But we want to expand this so we can better understand and we can better teach our doctors and our pharmacists how to treat this. So we can open this up so patients can have honest conversations with their doctors and say the real condition they're using it for, and hopefully treat this better in a more medical way instead of hiding under an umbrella of pain. So anyway, take it away, Trevor.
Thank you, guys. Abby, can we pull up that presentation, please? Okay. So here's a quick background for what our presentation will cover. Cover the origin of this idea that as you comes from the Utah Patients Coalition. We'll talk about how the Compassionate Use Board and Cannabis Research Review Board and their roles and responsibilities as it relates to the qualifying condition list. We'll talk about how other states have handled qualifying condition lists and reviews for and against other lists. And finally, some models.
So the background, as you all know, is that the Utah Patients Coalition would like to consider amending our statute that lists 16 qualifying conditions. And to replace that with a provision that would allow medical cannabis to be recommended for any condition in which the recommending medical provider would believe that there's some sort of therapeutic or medicinal benefit. And so the next few slides just show briefly the existing qualifying conditions. I won't read through all of them. But Abby, if you go to the next slide for me, Des alluded to this, but that last bullet point, persistent pain, often referred to as chronic pain, is by far the most common condition. I believe maybe roughly 80%, 80+% of patients have chronic pain as their qualifying condition. That's followed by PTSD, nausea, and cancer. Next slide, please. So the compassionate use board is the legal avenue for patients who do not have a qualifying condition, but believe themselves or that their medical provider believes that cannabis could have a therapeutic benefit. So how the compassionate use board or PUB works is that it's for individuals that either are minors or don't have a qualifying condition. They have to apply along with their medical provider support and supported documentation. And the PUB may approve, deny, or request more information from those patients to make an recommendation. So here's the disposition of PUB petitions since April 2020 this month. And again, this is just for patients who apply that did not have a qualifying condition, not minor patients. As you can see, the majority, actually the overwhelming majority of petitions by potential patients who do not have a qualifying condition are approved. Only 2 have been denied since the beginning of the program. And 12 were incomplete where the department requested more information that the provider did not receive that information. A decision on that. So, what is the Cannabis Research Review Board's relevance to this? I should have said from the get-go that CRRB did this morning provide a position letter on this issue, which we'll cover once we're at the end of the presentation. But CRRB is made up of 3 medical research professional support positions, one of which Misty Smith is on our board as well. And CRRB's statutory duty is to review scientific research regarding medicinal cannabis treatment and develop guidelines to treat qualifying conditions with medical cannabis. They're statutorily held to a rather rigorous requirement of evidence and of studies originating from legitimate sources to be able to make their recommendations. And as of this year, CRRB released its annual report in early October and recommended that no additional medical conditions be added to the qualifying condition. So let's talk a little bit about other states and what they do with qualifying conditions. There are 43 U.S. jurisdictions. I say jurisdictions because there's some territories that also have medical cannabis programs. But out of the 43 U.S. jurisdictions that do have a medical cannabis program, 37 and 2 territories do have a list of qualifying conditions. 3 states and the District of Columbia, DC, do not have a qualifying conditions list. But out of that list, the only medical only program that does not have a condition list is Oklahoma. And Oklahoma, it's cited in the memo. There was a study that came out this year from the state which showed 1 in 10 Oklahomans is a medical cannabis card holder. When you can compare that to Utah, where only 2% of our population, that's 75,000, are medical cannabis card holders. So it's definitely not a stretch to say when there's not a qualifying condition list and it's a medical only state. Oklahoma is our only example, and clearly there are many more patients that come to the program compared to the state with qualifying conditions. Next slide, please. So here, this chart or this table is also in the memo, but I went ahead and looked at other states' qualifying condition lists and tried to pick the 15 most common that Utah this is more food for thought to see what other states are doing with their conditions lists. Obviously, many of these didn't originate at the outset of their programs, they've been added over time for various reasons. But yeah, this is just some anecdotal information for you. So here's some of what you might consider some of the more controversial or hot conditions that people often advocate should be a qualifying condition for medical cannabis. And I just want to list them so importance of their profession is only a qualifying condition in Alabama, which is a medical state. Debilitating psychiatric disorders is a qualifying condition in one state, Missouri. However, that psychiatric condition cannot include psychosis. OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, is a qualifying condition in Michigan, which is adult use and medical. Insomnia and sleep apnea are qualifying conditions in one state, New Mexico, adult use and med. And then substance use disorder, or SUD, is a qualifying condition in one state, New York. There are a few states, I believe it's listed in them, 3 or 4, that do have opioid use disorder as a qualifying condition as well. So arguments for eliminating the qualifying conditions of cannabis. Number one, advocates would argue that it would create a patient-centered approach where a doctor who has a genuine belief that cannabis could help someone's condition be able to make that determination rather than having to rely on states qualifying. Number two, eliminating the list would remove the state from dictating what is we know people self-medicate cannabis for a variety of conditions. Number three, medical condition data would be more accurate. For us at DHHS, when we track qualifying conditions, it does allude to this earlier that if we were to eliminate the list, we would know genuinely cannabis for. If they have put chronic or their medical provider put chronic pain as their qualifying condition, that patient is actually using it for depression or anxiety, bipolar disorder, sleep disturbances, the department would be able to actually gain that knowledge and potentially drive more resources to learning more about that topic, to providing education materials to medical providers, as limited as they may be. Number four, off-label prescribing is legal and common in medical practice. Memo cites the FDA stating that roughly 1 in 5 prescriptions being typed which means the medical provider is prescribing it necessarily. Utah statute appears to try to keep medical cannabis in line or treated similarly to conventional prescription medication. Some would argue bring it in line by allowing this sort of off-label prescription. Arguments against number one, people will join programs by little or no evidence of medical cannabis is effective treatment for their condition. A lot of controversy here. And obviously, efforts to learn more about what conditions medical cannabis benefits is extraordinarily difficult research constraints in our country. We often have to look to Canada or Israel or the Netherlands to be able to actually gather some research on cannabis use for specific medical conditions. But undoubtedly, people will join the program where there may be no studies, no clinical studies, or even cursory studies on whether or not cannabis may objectively or likely benefit the condition. Number two, no qualifying condition list equates to a quasi-recreational program. Oh, I think you just pulled up the.
I'm trying to move it rather than moving because Deb's will be.
Oh, she texted, am I quiet?
Well,
Sounds like it's over you now. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Aren't you on the call?
Yeah, that may be.
Well, what is it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I wonder, Trevor, if we just mute us and you just turn it on your computer.
Sorry, so let me that.
We turn this on. Are we coming through clearly now? Can we get any confirmation from team members or
It
maybe
is so much
Jeremiah?
better.
So
this-
much better.
So much better.
Thank you.
What did you guys do?
Can you guys hear us better?
Oh yeah. Like it sounds like
Yeah.
real people. So that's
A
awesome.
lot better.
That happens with everybody as they speak, but
Yeah.
just
Well,
finish this.
for the presentation now, we'll run off of the audio on my computer. I apologize if it's been pretty poor audio quality. But can we jump back into the presentation?
Yes, please.
Did you lose us just as we got to this slide?
Oh no, you were pretty much gone the whole time, but I think we can infer what
Oh boy.
was said. We could read your bullet points and follow along basically. And so I am personally okay with where we're at. I don't know if the other ones need a little bit of help.
I'm okay.
Okay, very well. Then we'll carry on. So arguments against number one, I'll just repeat here. People will join the program despite little or no evidence that medical cannabis is an effective treatment for their medical condition. What I was saying, for those of us that could hear in the room, was that obviously there's major constraints on being able to study cannabis treatment for specific conditions, given the research environment in the United States. We often have to look to other countries like Canada, the Netherlands, or Israel for the very few studies that do exist on treating certain conditions with cannabis. And because of that, there's very little evidence or no evidence for some conditions that people may want to use cannabis for in a medical manner. Number two, no qualifying condition list equates to a quasi-recreational program. This is a common criticism of Oklahoma's program. Oklahoma's program is unique because also they have unlimited licenses, and therefore supply is a bit of a mess in Oklahoma. I believe actually I read from their state government in that report that's linked in the memo that they have 28 times the supply compared to demand in Oklahoma.
And a lot of unlicensed
Yeah,
facilities.
there's a massive criminal element too. But regardless, when we at least talking about patients, 1 in 10 Oklahomans is a medical cannabis card holder in that state. Which, yeah, it's about 500,000. Yeah. Number three, when compared to FDA approved drugs, not a lot is known about medical cannabis. So a list of qualifying conditions is necessary. This kind of jumps off of number one in saying that because of the dearth in research we have on medical cannabis and its application to specific medical conditions, there's just a lot of gray area when it comes to valid, well-researched and repeatable results in studies related to its medical use. And therefore, it has a unique area that we have to acknowledge, where we know that for the conditions that are approved in Utah, there are some studies that do show cannabis may help. The legislature does say in the law, in the statute, that the state of Utah in that qualifying condition list does not advocate or support that there's any evidence for those conditions, though. Number four, individuals with non-qualifying conditions already may receive a medical cannabis card if their petition is approved by the Compassionate Use Board. And as we saw by the earlier data, the Compassionate Use Board for those with non-qualifying conditions tends to have a disposition of approving those applications unless there is a lack of supporting documents and the medical provider doesn't provide those. So here's 4 potential recommendation options for the board. Number 1, keep the list as it is. Don't add anything. Don't detract from it. Number 2, approve an additional condition or conditions to be added to the qualifying condition list. This would most likely, the board could vote on a specific condition today, like sleep disturbances, or at the direction of the chair, the board could approve looking into specific conditions as individual agenda items. So more evidence, research, conversations, and thoughts could be shown to the board on specific conditions. Number 3, add a special provision to the qualifying condition list, allowing recommending medical providers to recommend medical cannabis for any condition in which they believe cannabis would be therapeutic or palliative. This is the case in New York, which is adult use and medical, that New York has what you might refer to as a catch-all provision, where a medical provider could recommend for anything where they believe, and I took that language from New York, be therapeutic or palliative.
And Trevor, they specifically made that change in their law after they'd already.
That's
had a
correct.
medical cannabis program.
Correct. That was not from the get-go of their program. And I believe it's Maine or Massachusetts actually that has a similar provision where if it's a debilitating condition that's not explicitly defined in the law, I couldn't find anything explaining that, but if the medical provider believes the condition is debilitating enough, then they could recommend for that condition.
And in the end, what they have in New York and Maine is it's as if they don't have qualifying conditions. Anything can be recommended by the provider.
But still within.
There's
the
a
normal
catch-all
standards of
provision.
Care for the doctor, correct?
Right, right. So I think it's just important to emphasize, in my opinion, 3 and 4 are very similar. And in fact, they have the same result.
Yeah. To specify for everyone, number 4 is saying eliminate the qualifying condition list entirely, like Oklahoma. Although Oklahoma started from the beginning of their program with no list. And number 3 is saying keep the 16 existing qualifying conditions, but add that catch-all provision that gives that power to medical providers to recommend for, whatever the language you would want it to be, whether it's a debilitating condition, if they believe there's therapeutic palliative benefit. But that's what those 2 decisions are saying.
Because New York and Massachusetts both still have enumerated lists. They just have a provision at the end.
Correct.
Which is what you're talking
Correct.
about.
But what good does the list do if you got a catch-all? Right? The result is still that providers are recommending cannabis for whatever they want.
Within the normal standards
Except
of
with,
care of medicine, correct?
Right,
with-
which would be the case with eliminating the qualifying condition list.
Yeah.
with number 3 though, it still has the list of kind of preferred conditions that we've already agreed to. And then it just says, oh yeah, and if you have something beyond this. But I think what number 3 does that number 4 doesn't do is that it still has a kind of like a conditions list for a guideline and for doctors that may say, oh, should I recommend it for this? And they look on the list and it's like, oh, this is already approved. Then if they know enough about a specific condition and then choose to recommend beyond that, that would be why we would add a condition in which they believe cannabis would be therapeutic or palliative. So that's number 3 is my preference. But I do like that we already have kind of our list that is recommended, and then if they feel brave enough to go above and beyond that, they can in their scope of practice.
Answer the presentation.
No, that's it.
Okay.
I'm happy to answer any
Yeah,
questions.
no, appreciate that. Anybody have any questions on the board for Trevor about his presentation?
I do have a question. Do you know, you may not answer, has the CRRB looked at any of these conditions or studied them that are listed on here in the prior meetings?
They have. So just this year, CRRB tackled insomnia. And I believe the legislature asked CRRB to look into insomnia and made a recommendation that there wasn't sufficient evidence at this time to support the use of cannabis for treating insomnia.
Based on insufficient evidence.
Insufficient.
But can't we also say that they have found that there was, except for pain, there wasn't sufficient evidence for almost any condition, including all the ones we have on the list currently. And then even pain was like, use it cautiously. And except for like terminal illnesses in which they're like, well, it doesn't really matter, so go ahead. But it's not like it's a board in which they've been positive pro cannabis approving any of the conditions we have so far. Correct?
I actually fundamentally disagree with that opinion. I think that it's not really the Cannabis Research Review Board's approval or disapproval of any of the uses. All they're doing is, or all we are doing is analyzing the evidence, the clinical based evidence that's available in the literature and saying there is evidence to support for or against, or there are safety issues that would limit, prevent, or support the use of the medications.
So you're
And-
not, okay, go ahead, sorry.
No, I think that we have supported utilities when the evidence is there to support it and when there's no clear evidence of potential harm for its use.
Can you tell me, I have a list somewhere, but can you tell me off the top of your head what conditions have been approved by the CRRB that are on our current conditions list right now?
I don't have that list in front of me.
But
I do. Give me just a second. I can pull.
if I could, Des, I just think it's important to point out that what one goal the board has had is to evaluate each of the existing conditions on the list and to cite the evidence of scientific study that is out there about those conditions that have sound methodology, right?
Yes.
So there are some conditions on the list that have more evidence than others, right? Like, for example, persistent pain, more evidence there opposed to PTSD. When the legislature, I don't speak for them obviously, but it's true that the only factor that they considered when deciding what was on the qualifying conditions list was not scientific evidence. They had other factors they considered, like political reality. I can't speak for them, but they did not make the decision based completely on scientific evidence. But then they tasked the Cannabis Research Review Board to evaluate the evidence without bias. And so that's what they have done. They have no connections to the cannabis industry. And I don't think it's fair to say that they're anti-cannabis. I think it's fair to say that what they have done is they've evaluated evidence of scientific rigor with the same approach that they do in other avenues as a medical provider or a researcher. And the public and providers, we hope, have benefited from those assessments that they've done. If anyone is interested, they're on our website and it's well cited. It's every study that is cited by the board in their recommendations. There's information about that study. So I think it's important for the board to consider the value of that role and also of the University of Utah Center for Cannabis Research. As it launches, they will offer some of the same value as well. And it's important to keep that in mind. I felt like that was important to point out.
And just to answer Matt's question, since we weren't really able to get there, I can tell you for certain, I know the board's looked at anxiety and, as I mentioned, insomnia this year. Out of this whole condition list from other states, I would need to go back and double check. The board's been around since 2017. So that would take a little bit of time, but we could provide that to this board. We just need a little more time.
And if I can add to what Trevor's saying, I think it is within the scope of this board, certainly to work with the Cannabis Research Review Board and request updated reviews of some of the potential qualifying conditions. Particularly in light of the vacancies on the current board and the lack of representation of qualified medical professionals on this board. With the Cannabis Research Review Board, it's almost exclusively medical representatives and trained researchers, as well as we have a certified pharmacist on the board. So we're getting in-depth evidence-based reviews of the literature of the highest quality and summarizing that, which really is focusing on the efficacy and the safety of medical cannabis in light of the standards of care that are currently available. And I think that that is invaluable for the advancement of a medical program. Anything short of that, I think, is taking away from the medical program and taking it in a direction that is somewhat different than a medical program.
Misty, I do have one question for you, Missy. And you and I have talked about,
Yeah.
the difficulties in doing research on medical cannabis, right? And the fact that the research you all accept, there's not a ton of it, right? But we do know there's research from other countries. We also do know there's lots of years of anecdotal as well. I understand in the realm you come from, that gets discounted a little bit, but in the realm we come from, that's a lot of what we have, right? Because it does remain federally illegal. We're not able to do the research. So how do we potentially balance the lack of research because of federal illegality or the other challenges it faces, and trying to put cannabis on par with other, medical interventions, other medications? We hear about off-label use, or we hear about, different things. There's an FDA approval process, right? We don't have all of that at our disposal. So how do we move the program forward with that being an issue? I mean, do we just wait, like cannabis has been waiting for 100+ years? What Nixon did with the Schaefer Commission study in the 70s, what happened with LaGuardia back in the 20s, right? So in your mind, how do we balance those two?
Well, we do what's already happening in the state. We support and advance programs like the Center for Medical Cannabis that right now is starting at the University of Utah, but will ultimately involve statewide other institutions and be a comprehensive program to address the agricultural needs, but also the medical needs in the state. But also, if you look at the literature and the research happening on medical cannabis, the literature is expanding exponentially. If you had searched 5 years ago versus the current year, the publication numbers are skyrocketing compared to what was available 5-10 years ago. So I think the positive changes are occurring. I think what we have to do is be responsible in our analysis and make sure that the highest quality research is what's being evaluated as we make the decisions moving forward. And I think that involves having clinical representation at the table, which we currently do not have amongst this group until our 2 open seats are filled, both for safety and efficacy reasons, but also essentially to do no harm, which is the #1 tenet in healthcare. So I think that I certainly agree with everyone on the committee that more research is needed of the highest quality. And I think that we should work in concert with the Cannabis Research Review Board and give them a priority list for the conditions that we think are the greatest need and potentially the greatest benefit based on the numbers, some of the numbers that Trevor has produced in his analysis of the needs of the state of Utah. And I can tell you that will be prioritized.
Because I can tell you, I know there's some other states that do allow, at least one I know that I've read of that allows a petition process, right? To petition to add additional qualifying conditions. I know there's kind of sounds like an informal process with the CRRB. Maybe that's something that we can consider. You could petition to have qualifying conditions added. I know in some of those states, it was either like the Department of Commerce, whoever oversees it, or the Department of Health, or whoever it is. That might be something that is good, because I think what Des expresses is just from an outsider's perspective, sometimes looking at you all's board, it just seems like it's no, 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 no. I understand the reasoning behind it, but I think what we're just trying to do is find a balance between the two. And I think a lot of what comes down to, for me, and I've been saying this recently, is cannabis has been legalized in the state of Utah for medical purposes. The voters voted for it, right? The legislature has made many changes. Everyone sitting at this table, touches this industry in one way or another. It is really to try to normalize cannabis, right? To treat it like other medical interventions. So I guess because of the dearth of research, maybe that warrants some of these additional guardrails, but sometimes it's difficult for us to understand why cannabis is being treated, in our eyes so differently than maybe other medical interventions. It's just trying to get them as close to one another as possible. And I think if you read the laws, that's been the intent of the legislature. So I think that's the reason for exploring this. at least from my perspective.
Yes.
Matt,
And
you had a
that's why
question?
that's why the board, the Cannabis Research Review Board has been very transparent in the assessments that we've done. And how we select the quality of the research that's included in our reviews. So,
If I might add, I didn't touch on the letter that the Cannabis Research Review Board sent this morning. And maybe you can help me, Misty. I assume this was a unanimous
Yes.
collaborative effort in writing this letter. But the very end sentence says, we would promote keeping the existing qualifying condition list and welcome the opportunity to modify it as the need arises or the body of knowledge supports it. So as the need arises, if the need is that there are conditions that folks who represent patients like Nanette and Des, or that the industry is aware that patients are asking for products for certain conditions, or just that it's common knowledge that anecdotally it's used for that condition, this may be a great opportunity for both boards to work together, because particularly if any new condition is going to the legislature, having the support of both boards and the vetting of both boards will make it infinitely more palatable for folks. There'll be a certain amount of confidence as opposed to this board solely potentially approving a recommendation for new conditions. And I wanted to mention too, as you all have alluded to, we have no medical providers on this board at this time, but we did receive a letter from our last medical provider, Annalise Keene, who was a mental health specialist. And she says in her letter, her two main concerns are that, as we've said, there's not a lot of strong evidence on certain conditions. So if you can, recommend for anything, there's a legitimate concern there. And also that this would, quote, create an opportunity for unscrupulous QMPs, qualified medical providers, to prescribe medical cannabis for almost any condition, even when patients would better be served by other treatments or could be harmed. And so I just wanted to add that real quick.
And Matt, sorry, Richard, Matt had a question and then Nanette wanted to say something. I would like to speak. Go ahead, Matt.
I think the question I have on here is, it's more kind of our role as our board. We can advise. Are we looking to, unilaterally, just tell the statute? We want a statute change in these qualifying conditions? Because that's really what we're here for as an advisory board, is to the legislators. Because it's already in statute that my understanding is the Cannabis Research Review Board, in statute, they're supposed to review all the qualifying conditions. So is our recommendation just to the board, to the Cannabis Research Review Board? I just don't see like how these options we have fit to what we should be doing. If that makes sense.
I agree.
Yeah, that's what I'm asking.
Yeah,
Like,
they have to ask Des. To me, I think what we see
Yeah.
is we've been asked to advise on policy. This is a policy issue. I understand there may be another board that does this as well, but we've been asked to advise on policy. A lawmaker has specifically asked a member of our board who has put this forth as one of her legislative priorities to get our take on it, right? So I think that's how it came to us, right? It's not as if we think this is our job versus the Cannabis Research Review Board. I think we're being asked for our input, and that's part of why this is a discussion. If nothing else, this is the start of a discussion that has been a long time coming. And I know there are people that have many opinions on many sides of this, but it's, at least we're having the discussion, right? If nothing else.
sorry to interrupt. The memo I have here just says the Utah Patient Coalition. Doesn't say a legislator or anything. I requested this.
You can.
Just more background info.
Okay, I'm just, I go off of what I have, and that's what I'm.
Sure.
So if I'm missing information, then I need.
Does,
the
if
whole
you need to
picture.
fill Matt in, please do so.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it was a conversation that I had with Senator Vickers, and he just said that he would like for this to be reviewed by our board, as I ask again this year for sleep specifically or suppositories. I would like to say that I have already asked the CRRB to review both of these, and after I did that, because they said no, I was unable to get them passed through law. Now, when I bypassed the CRRB and I had atomized sprays and I had acute pain, just ran through the doctors that were sitting on the Health and Human Services committees. They looked at it when I just went directly to them and we bypassed the CRRB. I was able to get them added, and now they are both used by patients. So I have, like I said, like suppositories. We're on year 3 of me asking for suppositories. You're not going to get high. They're not going to cause problems. I would like to be able to produce them in Utah instead of me having to have private phone conversations with patients where I explain to them how to buy the stuff on Amazon and make their own. I think that we have producers in Utah who do it. So for me, another thing that we need to remember is our program was designed that we didn't need evidence because we understand that there is a lack of evidence. This is not something that we can produce right now and say that, hey, if we're going to be using this for any of these, there's not a lot of evidence to prove that it is going to be safe and effective. We have to let the patient decide if it is effective, and we can understand that mostly it's safe, right? So, and the other option is we continue like we are right now, where patients are still using it for these conditions. We're not going to have a big boom of patients because we opened it up to sleep disturbances. I don't imagine we're going to see any increase. What I think we're going to see is patients admitting that that's what they're using it for and having honest conversations with their doctors. And so, looking at the possible conditions that doctors would use it for, I also believe that doctors in Utah do live by the mantra of do no harm, right? And that we don't have to think that, or we shouldn't be thinking that our doctors are just going to see that there's now no conditions list in Utah and just go nuts and start recommending for like bunions or something, right? So they already are doctors. We already trust them with patients. We're just saying, instead of us having to go back and ask for every single condition and a patient that needs it for that, going under a different condition on the board or waiting a year, which doesn't usually happen. We find a way to get them on. Why don't we just open this up and so we can take accurate data, have good conversations with our primary care physicians, and move this more into a medical program where you actually can have a conversation with your doctor instead of hiding under a different condition's name while you seek help. That's what I'm asking. And the data will come when the data is available. And then we will know how to use these products in a better way. But right now we're just trying to relieve symptoms. And I think we're already doing that. I would just like to clear up anything that makes somebody need to be, name their secondary condition instead of their primary condition. I want people to just be able to upfront have a conversation with their doctor and push this into the medical program instead of seeking to find a QMP that will write it for pain, because that is a symptom of a larger condition.
Awesome. Thanks, Des. Lynette, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to say, I like that you brought up doing no harm. And I understand your intent where that comes from. But what about the harm of keeping cannabis or medical cannabis and access to that for patients that are having trouble sleeping, like Des is talking about, that are, doubling up on their Ambien and taking things off label because they're desperate, because they don't have access to something like this, something as easy as this, something as safe as this, that can do much less harm than prescription drugs or street drugs or Delta-8 that we are having a problem with in this state. I just think we should worry about the harm that it might be doing, not having access and keeping it from those that really want it. I don't know that someone's going to be negligent with the prices that we have in this state and want to be really abusive with it and pay the prices that way from a patient point of view, from a patient perspective. That's how I see.
Okay, we do have some folks here in the room who would like to comment. But first, Abby, do we have anyone online who would like to comment on this? I don't know if anyone signed the form or if we have hands raised. We don't.
Responses online. We do have 2 people with their hands raised.
Okay, we'll go for those folks. Justin, we'll unmute you and you will have 2 minutes.
Yeah, guys. Hey, just wanted to say thank you very much for the discussion. This is Justin Ariola, Life Elevated, Hilliard brand. This conversation is very important. Traditionally, the pharmaceutical industry uses what they call post-market data to add other conditions that they're already approved medications can also be used for. So it's basically anecdotal evidence. It's not studied, but it's driven by the anecdotal observations from people who are already taking these medications for things, and they notice other things that come from it. So I wish that we would be able to give a little more weight to what we're considering anecdotal evidence, but there are real studies that are being done that can't be done in the same way that the FDA requires, just because the nature of the schedule of cannabis. So I wish we could be a little more effective in the studies that we're looking at through CRB, with the understanding that, because it seems like that a lot of the mention is, well, it's just not the right type of study that was done, but there is good data there. So it would be nice to see the board being a little more open to some of the studies that they're taking in.
Awesome. Thanks, Justin.
Yep.
I believe Alyssa was next. Once you're unmuted, Alyssa, go ahead. You'll have 2 minutes.
Oh, I'm sorry. I did not mean to raise my hand, JD. I apologize.
Okay, thanks. All right. Anyone else online? Okay. We will turn now to the room. Michelle McComber, please make sure to state your name and your affiliation. Yep, please come up to the table. State your name and state your affiliation, please, before we make your comment, and then you will have 2 minutes.
All right, thank you. My name is Michelle McComber. I'm with the Utah Medical Association. The number one discussion we had between all parties when we started down the road of medical cannabis was that the program would be medical and not move to recreational. So any recommendations should follow bona fide science and studies. We set up a Center for Medical Cannabis Research past session to do and approve studies. Utah should not be getting in front of the science. It should not be it should be one tool in the toolbox for medical cannabis, not the whole toolbox. We already have a broad list, some of which is already not backed by a lot of science. We don't use one tool for everything and for all care in anything that we do, anything that physicians do. High quality evidence, we need to be careful because we've created a program outside of the FDA. So we need the evidence to back up what we do. The Research Review Board looks at scientific evidence, as was stated, and decides if that evidence supports what should be done with medical cannabis. I think Desiree said that the state should stay out of determining, but we set up a state program that went outside of the FDA, so the state should determine with the input from medical providers and science, because we've gone around the FDA. Off-label is still limited, and there is a science behind it, even though you mentioned off-label use. You can't blame research as a reason to do it, lack of research. Just a lack of evidence does not mean that we move forward with it. We support number 2, number 3, number 4 on the arguments against eliminating the list, which I won't go into because that will take up more time. We support the recommendation by the research board to not expand the list at this time, but to wait for recommendations by the research center at the U of U and or high quality scientific evidence. We also do have the CUB for those who fall outside and who may need some compassionate use. Because someone wants it for whatever reason does not mean that science backs it. Moving the program forward, as the chair said, what does that mean? It should not mean that everybody with everything is on cannabis. It must be backed by science and not anecdotal evidence. It is treated like other medicines. We have restrictions.
2 minutes.
Okay, I'm almost done. We have restrictions on many medicines. Thank you.
Saying that the quorum of the board is to just, when you run out of.
I know I had,
Request additional time, just making sure everyone follows the rules, not trying to cut. you
I
off, just
had
make sure your
10
request-
seconds left. Thank you.
And I'll give you your additional 10 seconds. Go ahead.
It is treated like other medicines. We have restrictions on many medicines throughout statute in Utah. Thank you.
Thank you. Looks like next on our list is Walter Plum. Please state your name and your affiliation.
My name's Walter J. Plum III. I'm an attorney. I'm the head of Drug Safe Utah. That's advocated several positions up in the legislature over the last 4 years. I'd like to point out that to this board that someone asked the question, how is marijuana different from another drug? I'll tell you that it's still a class 1, Schedule 1 drug. And it's still addictive. Studies have shown among youth that with youth regular use, you're going to end up with about a 3% psychosis rate at some time in their life. I have the SHARP study with me. Just came out about a couple months ago, 2023, marijuana lifetime use. I'm just taking one column for time. 18.7% of 12th graders have lifetime use. Past 30-day use, 8.6. That's pretty close to 1 out of 12 or 1 out of 11 in our state. That's 30-day use. This is a youth-oriented state, and education of our youth and protection of our youth is of the highest priority. For an example, last year, the Patients' Rights Coalition tried to get new regulation on advertising. That was changed at the end by us, that it can't affect youth. Advertising cannot try to lure youth in the state of Utah. I notice some of that's being violated right now. My main point is that everything should be analyzed how to affect youth. Your position of changing this to anything is recreational, not medical.
I believe it's Art Brown.
My name is Art Brown. I represent myself, and I'm concerned with underage 21 and also the marijuana that shows up in our impaired driving too. When we passed marijuana as medical in the legislature, I really support the research board's position. And that was the guardrails that we all committed to and agreed to when we decided to do that. And I would certainly like to see us stay with their recommendation, because I think that it needs to have the appropriate set of research done with it, and not in a checkerboard fashion of any provider deciding what to use. I think there's safety in it for our kids. I think there's safety in it for parents. I think there's safety all the way around if we set and stay with the guardrails. So I haven't seen any arguments that would really persuade me to depart from the research board's recommendation. And I know it slows up what others would like to see, but there's others of us that would really like to see, and when we passed it, would like to see it in that regiment that it's in with the research board recommendations. So that's our thoughts on, that's my thoughts, and I can tell you a lot of other people too, so that we can confine it to the best for all parties in balance. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. All right, last on the list of something, it's Nareth Bond.
Hi, Nareth with Dragonfly. As an operator, I get a firsthand experience to deal with the very patients that this program is here to serve. And look, we all know we have these challenges with, being scheduled and classification, the inability to research. But quite frankly, the only data point that I need is the 75,000 patients that, despite all the hoops you have to jump through to get in this program, they are in this program. And those people just get left out as if they're not people. Sorry, there's not a data that says that this actually helps for sleep. But I can tell you right now, one of the best-selling edibles in the cannabis market is our sleep edible. Not, I want to get high and I want to get intoxicated and I want to get messed up, because I use it for sleep. There is no condition on that list, yet that is the #1 selling edible that's on that market. And I really appreciate Nanette's perspective in terms of do no harm, because we have patients all day that come in and say, why am I getting treated like some kind of leper? Like, I just want to go to sleep at night, but it's very hard for me to even have a conversation with my medical provider because I'm afraid. I'm afraid that I'm going to be judged. I'm going to be afraid that I'm going to be typecasted, because we all have stigmas. Every single one of us grew up with what we thought cannabis was. And we know what the truths are. There's enough data and evidence to show why Schedule 1's even a scheduled drug. Our government decided. People that didn't know any better decided that with no scientific evidence, right? And we continue to use antiquated terms like the word marijuana, not knowing that there's actually racist origins to that. And we use it because we don't know our history and we don't know our past. 75,000 patients tell us otherwise. Those are the only people that matter, right? And we can look to other books of research and evidence all day long when we have it right here in front of us. Let's ask those people.
Thank you. Anyone else in the room that would like to comment on this? Do we have anyone else online? Okay, we'll bring it back to the board and we'll give Rich a chance to make the comments that he has.
Great. I just felt it was important to emphasize that Utah's medical cannabis program does not say no to those individuals that have non-qualifying conditions. 35 of them have had their petitions approved. They have had conditions such as anxiety, insomnia. Yes, it does take a little bit more time, but because there, I think, is more vetting necessary in those cases, the current law does have them go before the Compassionate Use Board. And the far majority of those type of petitions, of the 49, 35 have been approved. So those individuals today are accessing medical cannabis every day as needed with the consultation with their provider, having had to go through the Compassionate Use Board. But I just want to emphasize there is this path where they do get the access that others do. It is not a firm no. It is, these petitions are reviewed and some are incomplete. More information is requested. One critical piece of information that I know that the Compassionate Use Board always requests is evidence of having tried other treatments that are evidence-based. And I think that there is a lot of agreement among medical providers that medical cannabis should not be the first course of treatment. It should not be the first option. And what the board exists to do is to ensure that it isn't the first, it's not the second, but there is some vetting of other remedies that are evidence-based prior to when they try something that less is known about, opposed to the other medications that they might have taken or other treatments that they might have attempted in the past. So important to point out that Utah has a program that allows a path that has in the past issued cards to individuals with non-qualifying conditions. Despite the fact they're not on the list, they are getting access to medical cannabis.
So is there a reason for not recommending medical cannabis as a primary, the first, type of medication someone takes because of a lack of research? Because they don't have that, they can't lean on it like they can't lean on the FDA. You see the conundrum that cannabis is put in, right? And I think this is part of what, Narek was speaking to. Cannabis has been put into a conundrum. And the only people that ultimately are being harmed by this are our patients, right? That are trying to use it for the condition that they have, right? And they're being told, well, hey, science hasn't gotten there yet. But the science hasn't gotten there, not because there's not the ability to do that science. It's because of the policy decisions that our federal government has taken towards cannabis, right? I would much rather have a well-researched, peer-reviewed article to bring to you than to have to bring you the anecdotal stories of our patients, right? So this is just the conundrum I think the cannabis has found itself in. So I want to make sure if we say, hey, the reason they're not recommending it first is not because cannabis is some dangerous thing. We don't recommend it first. I want to know, why are they not recommending it first? And if it's because of a lack of research, that is a primary point of, I think, the conundrum that cannabis has found itself in. We would love to do all that stuff. Trust me, there are plenty of companies in America that would love to fund that research. Next month, we're going to talk about how Utah companies can hopefully provide the center, research center with medical cannabis, right? Dr. Forsyth has said he's going to come in front of us with rules. That's a great way to continue to move this forward, but this is the conundrum that cannabis finds it. You know, it's itself in, and it's unfortunate, right? It's one of those things where, you know, maybe the public's, you know, perception of it has, you know, outpaced the science, but it's not because for any other reason than it remains federally legal as Schedule I substance that very few people can actually study, right? Someone such as yourself, Misty, who wants to study this,
Absolutely.
is even finding those, you know, those issues. So that's the conundrum, and how we strike that balance, I think, is important. And if we are going to follow the lead of the legislature in treating cannabis like any other medical, you know, intervention here in Utah, it seems like maybe there are some hoops that cannabis has to jump through that maybe other things don't, that may just be based on the lack of research, right? So I think this is a good conversation to be having in general. But you also see that we are somewhat fighting with our hands tied behind our backs, you know, on our knees, you know what I mean, to try to say to you, hey, I can tell you patients are coming in. I can back up the data that Narek just shared. The most popular, some of the most popular edibles, if not the most popular edible in the program, has CBN. CBN is known to be sleep promoting, right? People come to us and say, hey, this is what I'm looking for, right? But that's not the condition that they necessarily qualify for. So I think it's just trying to be on par with other medical interventions. But if we can't do that because of a lack of research, you see the conundrum it places cannabis in, it places patients in, and it places, you know, those that service, those patients. So yeah, I mean, it's a very difficult spot to be in, but it seems like there are some things that are being applied to medical cannabis that might not be applied in other traditional medical settings. And that's difficult to know. And some of that is just because it remains federally illegal, right? That's just difficult. You know, it's just a reality.
Well, if I can comment, and I think we have to keep it in light that let's use Epidiolex as an example. Okay, Epidiolex, cannabidiol, started out as a Schedule I compound with the same limitations and everything. It wasn't until a pharmaceutical company did the FDA required clinical trials with it that it was able to move through the regulatory process by going through the appropriate channels, and now has entered into the market for the treatment of several genetic forms of epilepsy with the full support of the federal government. So there are pathways that exist if those trials are able to take place. And in the situation with Epidiolex, it was for the treatment of these rare genetic epilepsies that were pharmacoresistant to many of the therapeutics that are clinically available. So it had widespread support, but what that has done is it has shown us that those pathways do exist. And in fact, at least a byproduct of the cannabis plant is being treated exactly like every other clinical pharmaceutical agent out there because they went through the appropriate channels and got the approvals needed. So I don't think it's really a situation where they are preventing the development of these drugs through the FDA development process. I just think that to do those controlled clinical trials, you have to have support on many different levels. It starts, though, with a basic science supporting the need for the work to go forward. And you can go all the way back to the 50s and 60s when cannabidiol was initially being researched. Some of that work done at the University of Utah to push those studies in epilepsy forward. So you really have to start at the beginning and do the basic research that then will open up the doors to the clinical trials down the road. But those are happening, and we're seeing huge shifts in the field, huge increases, exponential increases in the amount of research with the use of some of the dosage forms that we're going to be talking about in a moment. I think if we were to do some of the reviews now on the Cannabis Research Review Board that were done 2 or 3 years ago, we would have more evidence to be able to review because there's been additional research done in the interim since it was first considered. So I think it's going to be an ongoing process of growth. And I think we have to be patient, but we have to do it correctly and safely moving forward.
All right. We're about 25 minutes or 20 so minutes over time on this one. Does anyone else from the board have any other discussion that they'd like to say?
Yeah, JD, I just want to say a couple things. First, I know that Rich, you said, you know, people are going through the compassionate use board and then they're getting approved. That is true. I can also list patients that have started the process and it was too hard. They couldn't find a doctor to get them through. I have probably 15 pediatric patients that I cannot find a doctor to get them through the compassionate use board for. And then I do know of one patient that needed it for a basic condition, and he was underage, and he began using it before he got through the compassionate use board because they needed information a couple times, and he got caught and he did go to jail. He did lose his job, and now he has that on his forever record. So it's not foolproof. And another thing that I just want to read is, I know that we want to go back over and over because this is a medical program, and I am the first one in the industry setting to want to push this back to the medical setting, right? And so, but we also have to remember that when we created this law, we knew that we were creating a law that was going to have insufficient evidence and the inability to find insignificant evidence. In 2661A 104, the qualifying condition, line 205, right? If you want to go off of the original bill, but it's in that code. It says, by designing a particular condition under subsection 2 for which the use of medical cannabis to treat symptoms is decriminalized, the legislator does not I've got to move my screen. Conclusively state that current scientific evidence clearly supports the efficacy of a medical cannabis treatment for the condition, or a medical cannabis treatment will treat, cure, or positively affect the condition. For this purpose of this chapter, each of the following conditions of the qualifying conditions are, and then it lists them. We already know in the law, as we wrote that we did not have evidence. We are not bound to find evidence in order to add more. But and another point is yes, we do have the CRRB now. I think it was Michelle said, or maybe it was Walt that said, we created this program knowing that they would be handling this. No, we didn't. When we created this program, they were still the product review board. They were initially for hemp, and then we branched out to let them review products. They wanted to review conditions and changed their description. Then we allowed them to start looking at conditions. So it wasn't like we had this as guardrails set up in the first place, and now we're just neglecting to use them. We created this with this language before they were active. And, you know, the other thing that I was thinking is, it's like, we all already specifically said when we were creating this law, did we want to put a clause in there that said that people needed to have tried other treatments? In creating HB 3001, that was determined that no, we were not going to do that. We were going to let doctors decide. We weren't going to make patients suffer through a couple different medications. I know that the Compassionate Use Board has required that sometimes, but that is not in the law, and that is not something that we decided to do. So we have then decided that, yes, it can be a first-line treatment for some patients if their doctor believes that it can be. And it's, again, it comes back, I know that people are comfortable to just kind of allow us to have a small conditions list, but I'm not trying to move towards recreational by adding suppositories. I'm not trying to move towards recreational by letting somebody take a gummy before they go to sleep, right? All I'm asking is that we have appropriate conversations with our doctors, that the people that are using this can say, I'm actually using this for sleep. I have horrible nightmares and this stops them. Or I have depression and this helps take the edge off on those days. Now, another thing is, I have hundreds of patients that I know that are using this for depression. I know the risk for psychosis is low, but wouldn't it be better if we were able to open that up and so they could have a conversation with their doctor and say, hey, I'm using this for bipolar. And now their doctor knows, and they can adequately say, hey, maybe stay away from these terpenes, or maybe that would come from the pharmacist most likely, but they could guide them in a direction in which to use it safely. They could be watching them to make sure that they don't run into one of these psychotic breaks, right? That are, again, extremely low, but a possibility if it's already in your DNA. So I'm not asking for more. I'm just saying, let's allow a conversation. And that's what will make this a medical program, is allowing patients and doctors to have conversations about what they're using their medication for.
Thanks, Des. We are about 30 minutes past on when we said we would stop this topic for today. I want to bring it back to the board for any potential action. I will say that knowing that we are likely, I'm not going to hold Rich to this because I know things happen, but it sounds like we should have those 2 seats filled on the board by the time we have the next meeting. I do think that is worth taking into consideration, but happy to take a motion, whether to rule on this issue today or whether to table this issue for next month, for whatever reason. But I do think we need to either wrap up the discussion and vote, or we need to wrap up the discussion and, vote to move it to a future, to the next meeting to continue the conversation. So happy to take, any potential action that anyone wants to propose. If not, we will just move to, we'll just put it on the agenda again for next month, knowing we'll have 2 more members, but happy to take any motions from anyone here.
I would make a motion to maintain the existing qualifying condition list and to work with the Cannabis Research Review Board if there are additional conditions that we want either reevaluated or evaluated moving forward.
In terms of DUI. I can tell you.
Existing qualifying condition list and work with CRRP if there are any other conditions that we would like to add.
Yes. Basically in line with the CRRB's recommendation, and it sounds like the American or the Medical Association's recommendation.
Okay, we have that motion pending. Do we have a second for that motion?
Second,
Who is this?
Kent,
Say who it is.
Kent Anderson, second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to maintain the qualifying conditions list as is, but to work with the CRRB on, adding additional conditions in the future. Will you please go ahead and take a roll call vote?
Nanette Perezi,
Yay.
Desiree Hennessy,
No.
Jimmy Higgs,
Yes.
JD Lorenzen,
No.
Matthew Page,
Yes.
Misty Smith,
Yes.
Okay, that motion passes with a vote of 5 yay votes and two nay votes. Okay, we'll move on to the next item of business, which is medical cannabis dosage forms. Again, this is something that was brought to us by the Utah Patients Coalition, and is something that Des, specifically brought to us in line with the qualifying conditions, based upon discussions she's had with lawmakers. So I do want to give Debs a chance to provide her, her input on this, since she brought it before the board, and then we'll turn to Trevor for his presentation.
Okay, I will be super fast on this one. So all we're asking for on this one is to just expand and allow any common medical routes for medical cannabis. We have already, a lot of these we have, right? We have sublingual, we have inhalation, we have topical. What we don't have is we don't have rectal, vaginal, and really that's probably the ones that I think that we need to add. But I thought while we were doing it, why not just do like Octic and like eye drops, right? Like just add those. Now, I'm not saying that they would be produced. I know that there is a big ask for rectal and vaginal suppositories, but as far as the ear and eye drops, I don't know. The rest of them we basically have. But just allowing those to be there so we don't have to go back if we find another patient that needs one of them and go and ask for a change in the login. Just opening up forms for producers to be able to choose what they create as patient need arises.
Okay, thanks, Des. Trevor, go ahead with your presentation.
Thank you, Chair. Slide, please. All right, here's a quick background of our presentation. We'll talk about existing legal dosage forms, suppositories, then eye and ear drops, the safety and efficacy of both, then a broader question of other dosage forms and product types, and finally some options. So background, JD and Des just said it. We know Patients Coalition is asking the board to take a look at specifically rectal vaginal administration via suppositories and eye and ear drops as a legal dosage form in Utah. Here is a list of existing legal dosage forms, as Des was speaking to a little earlier. The most common thing talked about usually in the dosage form list is the fact that unprocessed flour can only be vaporized and not smoked or combusted. But otherwise, this is the list. Anything not on this list in that left column of legal dosage forms cannot be legally manufactured in Utah for the medical cannabis market. But UPC, the Patients Coalition, is advocating for additions to this list as a way to address unique patient conditions, therapeutic goals, and individual preferences for the administration of medical cannabis. So let's first talk about suppositories as a legal dosage form. There's very limited objective, or you could say scientific, academic, clinical information available on cannabis suppositories, but there is a fair amount of anecdotal information out there online and in the real world on them. My research could find 5 of 16 medical-only states in the US, as well as Canada's medical and recreational markets having suppositories as a legal dosage form. But in other states where the dosage form or just the form product types of cannabis are less regulated, suppositories tend to either just be allowed by default or go unregulated entirely and aren't addressed in law. Some common reasons that I was able to find for advocacy for cannabis suppositories, and this goes for suppositories for conventional medication as well at times. Number one, inability to use cannabis orally or via inhalation due to esophageal or gastrointestinal issues. You can't swallow, you can't inhale. Number two, localized relief for vaginal or colon-related conditions, such as menstrual pain, endometriosis, hemorrhoids, and bladder pain issues. And lastly, I found that some people use it for dyspareunia, I believe it's pronounced, which is genital pain during intercourse. Next one, please. So the safety and efficacy of suppositories, I may sound like the CRRB here, but it's unknown. There isn't enough evidence to make any definitive conclusion on it. But CRRB, the Cannabis Research Review Board, did make a recommendation in 2021 after receiving a presentation that there was not, at that time, sufficient evidence to support the administration of cannabis rectally or vaginally. The memo also cites 2 studies where cannabis, or at least cannabinoids, were rectally and vaginally administered. And those 2 studies, one was a meta study, so not an actual clinical study. But I referenced a 2018 study coming from the University of Mississippi, which is well known for its cannabis work. And they reported no safety issues in administering a synthetic form of THC, which had greater bioavailability rectally. And the researchers did not give a thumbs up, but said this could be a further potential to explore, particularly for people with those in need of localized relief due to a certain condition, or as we said earlier, folks who can't swallow or inhale. Let's talk about eyes and ear drops. So there was very little to no information about this that I was able to find or ascertain. No programs in the United States that are medical have explicitly allowed eye and ear drops that predominantly contain THC. There are CBD eye and ear drops on the hemp market, which is federally legal. But at least in medical cannabis programs, there was no evidence that any state approves this. In fact, California and Nevada, for both adult use and medical, explicitly prohibit their manufacturers, their cannabis manufacturers in both the medical and adult use market from creating anything that would be administered through the eye. So some common reasons cited for eyes and ear drops would be same as suppositories, localized relief. The most common condition would be glaucoma, which is, I believe, in 19 adult use states and 6 medical states as a qualifying condition. And so some folks claim that it can help with intraocular pressure, which is the most common symptom of glaucoma. The safety and efficacy of eye and ear drops containing cannabinoids, again, is not definitively known. According to the University of Utah, which actually studied cannabis use for glaucoma, I believe they released this finding last year, 2 years ago. But they say that THC isn't water soluble and therefore can't be administered through a droplet into the eye as well as the ear. And I looked into some, there's again, very limited research that addresses cannabinoids in eye drops. But what I found is at best, the results are inconclusive. And there are studies that show that there may be an increase in intraocular pressure with high concentrations of CBD in eye drops. But again, that's not making any definitive statement on their safety or efficacy.
Actually, I can clarify that. If one point that was a key point in the University of Utah study was because of the short duration of action, you'd have to continuously be applying the drops to have any benefit. So it isn't practical compared to the standards of care.
Okay, thank you for that. What's the next one? So other dosage forms and products types, this is more, broadly considering what other states allow as medicinal dosage forms and different product types within those forms. So my research didn't find that Utah is unique in what dosage forms are allowed under statute. We generally fall in line with medical only states. Some states are actually more restrictive than ours. But what the Policy Advisory Board could do is recommend potentially to the Cannabis Research Review Board or study itself different product types within dosage forms. So this would be, for example, Utah has certain infused edibles that are legal, like gelatinous cubes, gummies, capsules, tablets, right? But the board could consider researching things like chocolate, which is commonly claimed to have be greater binder to THC than products containing gelatin. But should the board want to explore more of these product types, I'd be happy to put together more information. It would just merely take more time. Obviously we had a very long issue preceding this agenda item. So unfortunately, I'm not able to provide as much information as I'd like to, but I'd be happy if the board wanted to come back and explore those further dosage forms or product types beyond suppositories and eye and ear drops. Would be happy to help with that. And finally, I think we have our recommendation options. So I want to acknowledge we added these number 5 and 6, or excuse me, I should say 1 and 6 this morning. They are not in the memo, but we got an ask to add those from Misty Smith, which I think is a very good thing that we have more recommendations for the board to consider. But number 1, keep it as it is, no new dosage forms. Number 2, add suppositories. 3, add eye and ear drops. 4, consider recommending the addition of other dosage forms beyond those, as we were just discussing. Number 5, consider recommending new product types be allowed, such as chocolate as an infused edible. That's a very, very common topic. that I researched. And number 6, the board could table this vote pending a request of the Cannabis Research Review Board to do a somewhat comprehensive look at some other states, and I could assist that board in identifying those other types of dosage forms in other states and letting that board be aware of them, and that board could actually do some academic literature review on those and come back to this board with potential recommendations or options for it to consider. And with that, that is the presentation. Turn it over.
Wonderful. Thanks, Trevor. Missy, I did want to ask one question. Do you all study product types as well as conditions?
We have not yet.
You have not.
So, no, not at all.
So that would be something new.
Yeah.
Well,
Suppositories, I'm sorry.
Maybe when.
I thought you were referring to the chocolate.
Yeah, that's what I was asking about, but also, so you guys have studied dosage forms generally, like the broader categories of suppositories or something like that.
We talked about suppositories in 2021, but the article of interest that was pointed out it came out after our analysis, and I think it definitely warrants re-review by the board, because I think there's actually, I didn't have time to do an extensive search of the literature by all means, but I think I'm pretty sure there's additional work that's been done clinically on the use of rectal administration specifically. So.
But as far as like expanded product types within an already approved dosage form.
That hasn't been discussed. Yeah.
Yeah. I should
At
mention.
least not while I've been on the board.
I should mention real quick, and then I'll let you go, Brandon. The number one area where I was finding studies on suppositories at least was Canada. And that's why I referenced that meta study here. That meta study concluded that it's a rare but utilized in under research dosage form that could have benefit, but more work is needed. That was the conclusion of those researchers.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Something that often gets overlooked in these discussions is the cannabinoid testing for these products. It does complicate testing to add additional ingredients in these products. Like some places allow edibles like cookies to be considered a medicinal dosage form, and the flour, sugar, chocolate all complicate that analysis and could raise the testing costs for the medical cannabis licensees that are producing these products, and could also lead to more inconsistent results from the laboratories that are doing this testing. We have seen this in other states.
Awesome. Thanks for the input, Dr. Forsythe. Any further discussion from members of the board?
Now, I'm trying to, were suppositories initially as an approved form in the original law?
Prop 2, no.
No.
I remember when it was like specifically called out and removed.
Des can tell you, but my understanding is it was put forth either last session or maybe the session before.
Okay.
And ultimately was removed, but aerosols were kept in it.
It was in 2022.
There were maybe three, form factors she pushed for, and ultimately aerosols were what were set on. I believe that's where it was. Yeah. Des, correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, I mean, that's the first time that it's been on something and then removed. I have been trying to get it passed since year 2, because we were told to not try to pass anything, any changes on year 1. So starting year 2 was when we started with sleep and suppositories. But they didn't necessarily make it onto paper, if that makes any sense.
I mean, I can say from my perspective, as a member of industry, Matt, please chime in here as well. I would like to see you study not just not the broad form factors, which you've done, but the individual products. For us as a board, ultimately, we may decide as a board that it's good to go through you all for that as well, just like the last vote, came out. But there are products available in other medical only states that we do not have available here. And I would like to just, determine whether those have medical efficacy and things like that. So if there is research out there for you to look at, that's good. I think it is good to take into account what Dr. Forsythe said as well, but I think we should bring that issue back in front of the board in January with you having done specific research. I can talk to you. I've done some of my own research and looked at the different states of what's available at the actual retail locations, not just what it says in the law. But sometimes in the law, I found out in Pennsylvania, you can't actually chew an edible. You have to somehow just swallow it. interesting, right? I guess we could be dealing with that.
You can start.
Right, so like, interesting how that all works, So, but I would like you to look at those specific product offerings that are available in, the other medical only states. As far as what we do with the dosage forms, Des has proposed. I'll leave that open for additional discussion, but from an industry perspective, I think we see what's available in other states. I would like to know if there's I would assume there's medical efficacy behind it, but that's what I'd like you to find out for us for the January.
Can I add one other comment? So I think it's also important that we may want to consider if we do take this up at a future meeting to consider the items separately, because I think certainly from my review of the literature, there's more evidence for suppositories than any of the other suggestions made.
Correct.
And actually, in speaking with other members of the Cannabis Research Review Board, Lauren Heath and others raised points about pharmaceutical eye preparations. She is a licensed pharmacist. That these would need to be sterile to prevent secondary infections, although probably rare use of non-sterile eye preparations, particularly with something like THC that would have to be an oil-based preparation because of its solubility issues. Any non-sterile preparation could lead to vision loss or other serious infections, even potentially death. So she expressed concern that the current Utah cannabis manufacturing facilities where they may be produced may not currently be equipped to prepare sterile pharmaceutical products, or it would significantly increase their cost to make the changes necessary to ensure the sterility necessary for optical drops. Since this will have to be an aseptic preparation and meet certain federal sterility standards that are followed by compounding pharmacies and manufacturers of sterile products. So it's a whole different level of discussion that we'd have to have regarding eye drops specifically, or eardrops than with the suppositories.
Yeah, and to add on to that, I looked as best I could into the hemp market where these products appear. Suppositories are not uncommon. I mean, you can order them to your door today. The efficacy and safety of them is another matter. But Misty's correct that in my limited knowledge and what I was able to find out is that there is more support for suppositories than eye and ear drops, and there seem to be major concerns, which is why there's been no clinical study ever on cannabinoid containing eye and ear drops, at least that I could find. And that was a review of multiple different databases. So,
do you feel like you benefit from more research time with any of these?
I'm happy
Or do you
to.
feel like you've already done the necessary research?
I think I searched multiple journal databases regarding these two forms. And again, I believe that what can be said from the scientific and medical perspective, I don't think there's too much more that I can add to that. Although again, I'm more than happy to try. We can reach out to colleagues in fellow states and see if they've considered this, if they've even approved it, as well as maybe working with Lauren Heath, the pharmacist that DHHS contracts for the Cannabis Research Review Board. So I don't want to say that, nothing more can be said. Of course, we can continue to look into them. But I did do my best given the time constraints, and we changed the agenda in early December. So don't want to make any definitive statements. We'd be happy to try to provide more, although it may not be much.
Certainly, at least for to me, I think it's worth doing the additional research on the products themselves.
Certainly.
In front of us
Yeah.
here today, to bring that back in January. As far as the condition, the broader categories go, I think we can, do something similar to what we all did with qualifying conditions, or we can table it for next meeting. Maybe have some of these folks that we just spoke of come and provide, some testimony and some stuff like that. But any other discussion from the board before we open it for public comment?
How often is the Cannabis Review Board meet?
They have a meeting scheduled for January.
For January is our next
Is it
meeting.
before or after this?
It's before, I think it's the
Before.
9th.
Yeah,
Okay.
But this is not on their agenda.
yeah,
How often do they meet? Quarterly?
Yeah.
I think roughly.
yeah.
So the next time for them, if we would be April, a month after the session. Yes.
Mhm.
Just, yeah, I mean, it's just a logistics question.
Yep.
Yeah. is it possible to have like for us to vote to recommend that be added to their agenda?
Mhm.
I mean, we'd like to get this hopefully resolved, and I'm sure as a board member, you can add items.
I don't think it would be realistic to add to the agenda for Monday, but for the April agenda, I think certainly.
Right, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, because there has to be time to do the literature
No, yeah,
review. Yeah.
Right. And the way it operates is we do have an academic pharmacist, Lauren Heath, who we contract with to do that exhaustive search. She's been trained in how to ensure that it's done appropriately without bias and without missing studies that should be evaluated.
So we could run parallel paths essentially, right? We can direct our board analyst to do his own research, right? To bring back in front of the board in January. We could also make a recommendation for the CRRB to address it at their, you know, their April meeting. And honestly, we could provide some of the research you come up with, you know, to them, you know, as well. I imagine you guys will run across some of the same research, whether from a broad standpoint or from a more expansive, you know, already existing category, you know, standpoint.
I think as a board as well, we provide our recommended vote too. I mean, it's not, I think necessarily trying to supersede what the board brings as far as the review, but just saying based off of the information we've seen as an industry impacting patients and hopefully our QMP medical professional seats, we can come up with a recommendation that we see on why it should be either allowed or disallowed. So.
Obviously, the efficacy data is going to be more condition related than a general. I think it's probably going to be found to be more appropriate for certain conditions than others, because you want it, especially in the conditions where you're administering the drugs, it'll be local delivery for certain conditions, and that would make more scientific sense. But that's factors that can be entered into the analysis that's performed by the review board.
Okay, I do want to turn to the public. Do we have anyone online who either signed up on the form and has raised their hand?
We don't have anybody in the form.
Justin, we'll unmute you and you'll have 2 minutes. Remember to introduce yourself, who you're affiliated with, and then you'll have your 2 minutes to make your comment. Go ahead. Oh, yeah, no problem.
Hi, it's Justin Ariola, Life Elevated, Healy Rand. Just wanted to say I appreciate this discussion. Again, we already have terminal condition as an approved condition of use here in the state. And specifically in my experience with terminal care, suppositories have been hugely beneficial. They oftentimes are nauseous, have no appetite, and it just really decreases kind of the quality of life as you transition somebody from living to death. And so being able to administer that way can stimulate the appetite, reduce the nausea, and allow them to have their other medication that they need in order to stay out of pain and avoid like the IV morphine drip, which totally shuts a person down. With cannabis meds, they oftentimes are a little more lucid and able to communicate and have other experiences with their loved ones before passing. So that's just in my experience. And the same observations were actually used to improve synthetic THC, so the nausea and the appetite stimulation. So yeah, I think the evidence around suppositories is pretty clear. And then just to touch on Brandon's point, everything that we're already testing in the market, we would use this exact same ingredients to produce topicals, just into a little bit different form for the administration. And so it shouldn't be something that would be prohibitive as far as that dosage form. So I think it's something that we need to add as soon as possible.
Wonderful, Justin. Thank you.
Can I clarify something real quick?
Sure, go ahead, Dr. Forsyth.
Chocolate's not currently involved in any production that I know of, nor is flour. And those do complicate the analysis, but it's not I'm not saying it's not possible, it's just complicated.
Yeah, and I'm not necessarily discussing chocolate at all. I'm talking about for suppositories, the form that would be in the suppositories.
No, agreed.
Awesome. Thanks, Justin. All right. Anyone else that has their hand up online? No. Okay, we'll come back to the room. Michelle McComber.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity. Just to get out of the way quickly, we would not support chocolate or any other edible forms. We talked about this before, anything that's appealing to children. For dosage forms, we're not opposed to looking at suppositories. I don't think we should actually put it immediately on the list, but I do think it should be explored because it could be an option. We are opposed to eye drops. The American Glaucoma Society concludes, although marijuana can lower the intraocular pressure, its side effects and short duration of action, coupled with the lack of evidence that its use alters the course of glaucoma, preclude recommending this drug in any form for the treatment of glaucoma at the present time. We would be opposed to eye drops. So thank you.
Okay, next on the list is Minnie McGay. Please don't forget to state your name and who you're affiliated.
Okay, my name is Mindy Medeo and I'm a cannabis pharmacist. I also have a master's degree in cannabis medicine. And I have worked in the Utah program the last 4 years. As far as suppositories, I'm very supportive of allowing them as a dosage form, both vaginal and rectal. I have many patients that would use suppositories under the qualifying condition of pain, more specifically uterine pain, vaginismus, dyspareunia, menstrual pain, endometriosis, cancers, and many bladder issues. I do have patients that I know are shopping out of state for these suppositories, and I do have patients that are making their own suppositories at home. When it comes to rectal suppositories, I do have some experience with patients that have completed the RSO high dose cancer protocol they use very high doses of THC. And in this situation, it's recommended to use oral administration to minimize the side effects like nausea and psychoactivity. And so in this situation, I think both vaginal and rectal suppositories can be safer, less side effects, less psychoactivity. And I think the data is there and we have enough evidence to go ahead and allow this dosage form. And just as a side note, we don't need to really differentiate between vaginal and rectal suppositories. We can just call them suppositories because the milligram doses are similar as far as administration and the sizes are similar. When it comes to eardrops and eye drops, I'm completely against the eye drops by all the reasons everybody said. It's not safe because of solubility issues and the additives that we add to the formulations to make them water soluble are harmful for our eyes, and the sterility issues. And then lastly, when it comes to chocolate, I'm very supportive of us looking at adding chocolate as a dosage form. I tell my patients to add chocolate to their gelatinous cubes. So I tell them to take it. Okay, you may have a few more minutes, please. Can I have just 30 more seconds?
30 more seconds.
Thank you. Okay. So I tell my patients to add chocolate to their gelatinous cubes so that they can have an increased efficacy of absorption. So, and in my opinion, there is no difference as far as recreational disposition and being appealing to children between a gummy and a chocolate. And there is a formulary advantage because of the lipophilic nature of the cannabinoids to use chocolates. And so just to summarize, I'm saying I would recommend that you vote yes to suppositories, absolutely no to eye drops, and consider chocolates, and hopefully yes to chocolates. Thank you.
All right. Next on our list is Walter Plum.
Drug Safe Utah supports the position. You want me to go and say it?
Yes, please.
Drug Safe Utah would support the position of Utah Medical Association.
Thank you, sir. Art Brown.
Thank you again, Art Brown. I've listened intently to this discussion. I really appreciate this group. I found the information a little bit lightweight today on as far as making decisions go. And for me, again, one of the we've made a societal agreement on how the research board works and how these different board works. And for us and for me, I think we really need to have the research board look at these issues and have more professional input from them. And that's what we look to keep the balance and safety in the community. So, like I say, the information on eye drops, I would get nervous about, and I think the research, we would all benefit by having the research board really look into the issues, and then I think a balanced decision could be better made. So I really support sticking within the protocols that we've established and agreed upon. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. All right, Marathon.
And Narrative with Dragonfly. One of the challenges that I see as an operator oftentimes is really trying to navigate the waters of, quite frankly, contradictory positions from different bodies, different regulators, different industries. Because as an operator, it's difficult to see that we're here to service patients and we're here to provide certain products to people, right? And this is medicine. We are in a medicinal state. This is a medical program. But, you know, Lord forbid you have easy access to it. Lord forbid you, you know, you need to go get a card to get to do these things, right? You need to jump through these hoops. You need to have a qualifying condition to do these things. I can stub my toe and go get an opiate pretty easily, right? I can go to any clinic and get ketamine. So it's difficult to understand sometimes where do we place these things. And on the topic of, you know, children, I think every operator in the industry is wants to protect children, but there's this message that somehow we're creating things that are appealing to children. And I have difficulty understanding where that definition lies. Who decides what's appealing to children? Because it happens all the time. And I struggle to understand the difference between why a gelatinous cube is any more or any less appealing to children than a chocolate bar is. Right? We have medicine and vitamins that are gummies designed for children that are out there, but sometimes we pick and choose when we want to protect the children, you know, and it's difficult to make decisions as a business when it seems like there's opinions that are involved sometimes. So I think what I urge is what is the definition when we use things to make decisions and say, yeah, we chose not to do this because it's appealing to children. I've yet to understand what that definition is. And also when it applies to packaging and marketing and advertising and very specific things. Sometimes it's appealing, sometimes it's not. Is a shirt appealing to children? Is a notepad appealing to children? Is a pen with a logo? It's challenging as operators to make those decisions when it's not clear. Thank you.
Okay, it doesn't look like we have anyone else listed. And if it seems like I'm being stickler about the time, it's because I've watched too many of these meetings, are included, where people have gone way over time and it's really hard to rein them in. So I apologize if I've had to get crosswise with anyone. That is not my intent in any way, shape, or form. We just have to control the time. So unfortunately, I'm the chair, and so I have to be the bad guy that tells you not to go over time and stuff like that. Nothing personal by that. That's just what has to happen. So okay, well, I'll bring it back to the board. I will say that I think as far as, I'm speaking more towards the individual product offerings that are available. Trevor, I do want you to study that for our January meeting. And I'd like to put that on the agenda. But happy to take a motion on anything else if we'd like to. But that one, since we didn't put anything forth this time around, I don't think we need to motion table or anything. I will just put it on the agenda for the next meeting. You and I can connect. I do have a list of things that I know are available in the medical markets that are not available here, or expansions on products we do currently have here that, you know, they have either in larger sizes or in different forms, so we can connect on that. So I think that takes care of that portion. If anyone would like to make a motion as to the broader dosage forms, happy to do that. But yeah, I think we've, unless anyone has any further discussion points, I think we're in a place of potential action. So keep that in mind.
Can you put up the 6 options again?
And if I could add something really quick, it's just that if the board wants to make a recommendation that the Cannabis Research Review Board evaluate specific to dosage form, there ought to be a vote made and a formal recommendation of that. It'd be good to record that.
Certainly, I think it's one of those 6
Right.
options, and you're going to see your vote.
Item 6.
Or a motion similar to that, or not similar. So yeah, bring it back to the board for potential action.
I'll make a motion that we add 1 and 4. I'm sorry, to what? Sorry. The add suppositories to the list of legal doses, what we got earlier. So I'm sorry, it's actually 2 and 4. Consider recommending, nope, they're all changed around, no, 4.
So
Consider recommending.
this is from the
Yes.
memo itself.
Yeah, sorry about
I
that.
apologize, I'm not reading.
You
the
should clarify that,
I
yeah.
should.
which I mean is still one form, right? I don't know.
Just
No,
read
they're all
the-
moved around. So,
Yeah,
the
one
column
and six
first,
are
the
new.
List of legal doses and consider recommending new product types to be allowed under certain dosage forms such as chocolate infused edibles.
Number
2 and 4 from that list. So we have a motion to recommend adding suppositories to the list of legal dosage forms and to consider recommending the addition of other dosage forms beyond, excuse me, number 5.
Yeah,
Consider
that's-
recommending new product types be allowed under certain dosage forms such as chocolate as an infused edible. That is the motion. Do we have a second?
Can I get a clarification?
Just say you're welcome to split it into 2
Of
motions
your
if you want to.
recommendation in that? Is this a recommendation, just a broad recommendation, just so it's a statute change? Or is this a recommendation to the Cannabis Review Board?
I think, are you, what you saying, just to clarify too?
I-
Number 2 is a recommendation to lawmakers, but number 5 is
Yeah.
what JD's saying, come back in
Right,
January,
yes.
you know, and we'll work together to address some of those new
We'll do
product
both.
types.
Yep, that's exactly how I'd like to
So
do
we
it.
would
So
have
need to
one
do-
recommendation going to the legislature today.
Yeah.
So probably let's break it into two motions.
Okay.
So the
So then-
first vote is add
There you go.
suppositories to the list of legal dosage
Yes.
forms.
There you go.
Would be the first vote.
Okay, so that's the initial motion that's been made, that we recommend to lawmakers that they add suppositories to the list of legal dosage forms. Do we have a second for that motion?
I'll second it.
Okay, we have a second. Please take the roll call vote.
Nanette Beresney,
Yay.
Desiree Hennessy,
Yay.
Jimmy Higgs,
No.
JD Lauritsen,
Yes.
Matthew Page,
Yay.
and Misty Smith.
No.
So that's 5-2.
Okay, the vote passes with a vote of.
Wait, that's for-
Oh, yeah, we
Yeah,
didn't.
I don't-
That's right.
Oh, sorry. Yes, and Anderson.
Thank you. Yes.
So the vote was
It's 5-2.
Yeah, okay, so 5-2, that vote passes. All right, now for your second.
Then motion to recommend, right? Is that what we're doing to the?
Yeah, so this would be the, consider recommending new product types be allowed under certain dosage forms, such as chocolate as an infused edible.
And the caveat to that motion is that we bring that back in front of the board next month. So is that a motion to table that to next month?
Yes.
Essentially.
All right, so we have a motion to table the consideration of recommending new product types be allowed under certain dosage forms such as chocolate as an infused edible to the January 2024 MCPAB. Okay, that's the motion. Do we have a second for that motion?
Second, this is Kent.
Thanks, Kent. We have a second. Take roll call vote, please.
Nanette Beresney,
Yay.
Desiree Hennessy,
Yay.
Jimmy Higgs,
So just confirming, it's just a motion to table until next meeting. If that's the case, yes.
Yes, correct.
JD Lauritsen,
Yes.
Matthew Page,
Yes.
Misty Smith,
Yes.
and Kent Anderson.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, that vote passed unanimously. All right. Where's my, there we go. Okay, all right, now we've gotten through items 1 through 6. We will turn our attention to item number 7. And before Trevor gets to his part of the presentation, I can speak to this. This is something that the Utah Cannabis Association has discussed and prioritized. It's also something that we as a company have discussed and prioritized from a legislative perspective. And I think what this could be is in preparation for what we're hearing on the federal level, right? Cannabis potentially being rescheduled to Schedule 3. This would be more so preparing ourselves, for that. I think part of this is too, is I do think patients do, and especially now have been going, between different QMPs, for various different reasons, whether it be cost, whether it be ease of access, whatever it is, people are choosing to go to maybe to a different QMP. And I think some people are struggling to, be able to always go, to go in person if they change QMPs. And so this is really just trying to help from an access perspective, and ease of access perspective, because if you're looking at the data, 43,000 patients have dropped out of this program. Some of those maybe because cannabis wasn't for them. or cannabis, as I've heard from some folks, maybe it cured their ailment, right? Or they're no longer experiencing those symptoms such as they needed. But to say that all 43,000 patients have left because of that, it could be cost of medicine, right? It could be the hoops they have to jump through to get, to get, certified, or get their recommendation taken care of. So this is where a lot of this comes from. And so that's the reasoning why it's been agendized. And with that, Trevor, I'll turn it over to you, my friend.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I don't have a prepared presentation for this because the memo is relatively high level, but I'll go ahead and speak to a few points in it. I mentioned up front in the memo, some federal law that may be worthy of consideration here. The Ryan Haidt Online Pharmacy Consumer Protection Act, which passed in 2008, required that certain controlled substances only ever be prescribed in person and not over telehealth. However, there was a temporary change to that due to coronavirus, and that change was actually extended this year to continue to allow Schedule 3 through 5 substances to be allowed to be prescribed via telehealth, with some certain caveats to that. But I thought that might be important to understand that not even Schedule 2s as of right now, and as of this temporary rule from the Department of Health and Human Services and the DEA would allow a Schedule 2, nay, a Schedule 1, obviously, to be allowed to be prescribed via telehealth. So I'll just give a couple arguments for and against this proposal. And I want to recognize this memo may not make every argument for and against, but are just some high level bullet points. Arguments for allowing patients to renew via telehealth with a different provider from their original would be, number one, face-to-face regulations make renewal inconvenient for experienced patients. People move QMPs for many reasons, right? They want to renew at less cost with somebody else, and feel experienced enough with cannabis that they don't want to have to come in person to a new provider if they're seeking less cost or they move to another part of the state. So some would argue that requiring a patient to meet a new provider in person is unnecessarily burdensome. Number two, telehealth is a very common practice, even given those federal regulations that obviously don't necessarily apply to cannabis, but are worthy of consideration. Telehealth is increasingly common. And if medical cannabis, kind of as we were talking about in some of the previous agenda items, if it's supposed to be something that's treated like conventional prescriptions, conventional medication, at least that's what Utah statute appears to endorse, then why put it in its own box compared to other prescription medications, which can be prescribed via telehealth with a new provider, one who hasn't seen that patient before. A few arguments against. Number one, medical providers conducting an in-person examination in a clinical setting ensures an accurate assessment. In short, being able to see a patient, look them in the eyes, conduct a physical examination, tests, questionnaires to assess their demeanor, is of massive benefit to some medical providers who would very much like to be able to see a patient in person that they've never had before, never met before, never prescribed before. Number two, there are concerns about the comprehensiveness of telehealth cannabis recommendations. I kind of just alluded to that. I think there's genuine concern that a recommendation would go very quickly with a provider, especially one who may have just financial incentive to be recommending cards via telehealth, rather than necessarily for the benefit of that patient and being able to conduct a thorough examination of that patient in person. Number three, cannabis contains psychoactive substances, and recommending its medical use shouldn't be taken lightly. As we all know, it's still Schedule 1, and allowing a Schedule 1 to be prescribed to a patient that the provider doesn't know, has never met, over telehealth may seem a little lax, to say the least. Number four, telehealth visits with a medical provider are always possible for a renewal visit if the patient has already met at least once in person with that provider. And this may be the most important point, is that if you're renewing with a medical provider, you can do it via telehealth. This is only for the in-person requirement is only for patients who are going to a new medical provider after they've been issued a card. Therefore, as kind of JD alluded to, we don't know how many patients have dropped out of this program because they couldn't make it in person to their renewal with a different provider. But nonetheless, the law is already flexible enough to allow patients who are renewing with their existing provider to do it via telehealth. And with that, thank you, Abby. We have the options up on the board, just two simple ones. The board could recommend to allow patients to renew via telehealth with a medical provider different from their original, or continue to require that if you're seeing a new provider, that you conduct that recommendation in person.
Wonderful, thanks, Trevor. I will point out that there is the possibility for a referral to change the way things go under federal law. If you've seen a medical provider in person and they refer you to a new practitioner, you are able to see those people via telehealth, thanks to the guidelines that Rich had sent me several months ago. Schedule 3, 4, or 5, they do allow you to do prescription for via telehealth for 30 days, but then a renewal after that. So it might have to be a referral, type of thing to allow this to be done. It just seems like it's another hoop to make patients jump through to stay, in the program. And thinking of patients that live far away from QMPs, just like patients that live far away from pharmacies, right? It's a very difficult thing to have to do. So to me, it's just another access issue. So there may be a way to do this, through a referral type of thing, but you would have to have a QMP being willing to refer business away from them to another QMP if that's what the patient wanted. So that's something that we could, a caveat that we could put in here. I do think I've heard concerns before, hasn't necessarily been brought up here, but I'll say it, about the doc in the box, right? Some doctor in, I don't pick out any particular state, but, located in some state who only does telehealth renewals, for patients here in Utah. They don't have an office here. They don't take on, initial recommendations. I think we could very easily place guardrails in the law that require them to maintain a brick and mortar office here in Utah and to also offer, that initial consult, right? So they would have to be a Utah-based, medical provider. As far as the idea of the interplay with federal law, look, we're already, well in violation of federal law with everything that we're doing, right? But if the referral would be a way to allow these patients to renew for telehealth, then I think that should at the very least be an option. But it's just another access issue that we've identified. We've identified it in the data as well as hearing from patients. Sometimes it's just, man, I want to switch QMP for one reason or another. But now I've got to go see that person, that doctor in person. So that's where this has come from. So that's just another thing I think to think about is the potential to maybe amend these options to say, if referred, or we can just recommend that, be allowed to be happen. But this is definitely something that's been on our minds, for some time. So with that, I'll turn it over to the rest of the board for any more comment. If not, we can move to public comment.
I think that we have an opportunity here to create some guardrails. I have never been a first visit telehealth champion because I do believe in comprehensive care. What we're seeing though here is oftentimes a regular care physician will see their patient and say, I think you could benefit from medical cannabis, but I personally don't want to do that. Go see a QMP. And so then they're finding one and driving to him, whatever. Sometimes those are far away. So I like what I'm saying is I like your idea of the referral, JD, to kind of make this more streamlined medical. But one of the concerns that I have had for a long time is the pediatric patients. We have and Rich probably knows, but we have 2 or 3, maybe it's less than that now, QMPs that will take a patient through the compassionate use board. It's just a ton of work, and they say that it's more expensive than the $200 or $275 that they get from patients. So very rarely will they even do it. We have a couple that do. But if you like, I know of a patient in Brigham City that has been waiting since the program started, been using a legal product because she does not tolerate car rides. And the closest one that she could get to is an hour and a half away. And that is just an insurmountable amount of time in the car for her family. If she could do first visit telehealth, she could join our regulated, safe medical cannabis program. But because of that specific barrier, she's not. So those are the patients that I want to focus on and create guardrails to keep predatory practices out and still provide an avenue for referral-based patients or pediatric patients, because the QMP list of who will refer them to the Compassionate Use Board is so small. And I kind of should be a no-brainer, in my opinion, with the Compassionate Use Board patients telehealth, because they're already going through the board. They're going to see the Compassionate Use Board, and all of those doctors will be approving of their care. So having them seen first visit telehealth, I think isn't, kind of a no-brainer on my part. They've already seen their primary care physician. Now they're doing a telehealth with just a QMP that's only taking cash, right? That's the only thing they're doing, is taking cash and helping fill out the forms. A lot of times the regular care physician will even fill out the forms. So we're just doing telehealth for somebody to cash in that $200 so they can go to the Compassionate Use Board. Other than that, I think that we do have an opportunity to create some good guidelines and guardrails so we can help the patients that truly are homebound to be able to get onto the program and use our program instead of, using the legacy market or the black market.
You guys are right. I do have a question. I mean, you kind of brought up that. So is this mostly patients are upset that they have to changing providers, so then have to go visit them in person? And are they mostly changing providers due to cost?
I think they're changing providers mostly due to cost or location, is what I have experienced. And let's not forget that in the beginning, a lot of QMPs got on board, filled their caps, and then bounced, right? We had doctors coming into the state, filling their caps and going back out, right? And as long as they were licensed here, that stayed. So then the patients they did everything they could do, and now they were left without a QMP that was willing to see them. And so they had to see another one. Now, a lot of those patients have the ability to go see another one face to face. But is it hard to during work? I can understand their reasoning. But again, I think let's focus mainly on these patients that have already got their card, and we know, that they are already in the program, or they are, their QMP could possibly be way too far away, or they are bed bound. I agree with what JD said. We don't need a bunch of doctors from out of state just seeing all of the patients here. That's not what we're asking. And I think we can weave this and build a program that allows for this with patients that are needing it.
I'm just trying to think how this benefits. I understand benefiting patients if they're looking. To me, it sounds like they're card shopping, and which in their right, they need to be. There's some outrageous prices out there for them to get their cards. I can speak. Luckily, like I have family members, their own family doctor prescribed the medical cannabis that cost them a copay.
Yep, and that's how it should be done.
Between that were able to do that, and they were lucky enough to get that. But others, they had to card shop, and that's why they're renewing. I think the thing you're going to run away with is, do we currently allow? Is it the specific recommending physician that they have to meet with, or if they're in a practice, can they meet with another one in that same practice? Maybe, for a telehealth, or is it
I mean, the law doesn't, and Rich can speak to this as well,
Yeah.
the law doesn't speak in terms of clinic to clinic, right?
No,
It
no,
speaks
it's just
in
a
terms of QMP. to
You change your
right?
QMP.
Okay.
Physician to physician. So in reality, if the way the law is currently written, even if you switch within the clinic that you are being treated at, you have to go see that other physician
First, yeah.
right? First in person, right? And I think that's the issue that I think that the patients are having. I mean, let's be frank, 43,000, as I've said, patients have dropped out of this program. If this has contributed to any amount of those patients leaving the program, the difficulty in being able to renew because they can't travel there, or it's otherwise some sort of, significant burden on them, they're being burdened in many ways already. This just seems like another way to burden patients and trying to alleviate that burden, understanding, that we have some things to navigate. So in my opinion, it would be allowing them to renew when switching providers. If we want to make sure we're in line with DEA's guidance, it would require a referral, right? That's what I'm reading right here in front of me. Here's the chart, right? This is the one we'd be under, right? If they would write a referral, then they could do it, right? But the way we have it currently written in law is that if you switch providers, you have to go see them in person. There's a way that we can do that to say, and I think you could put other caveats in to say, if you are going to be someone that offers telehealth renewals, so we can guard against the doc in the box, right? I think that's the other part of this to make sure of. But if it requires a referral, I would hope that the doctor would do what's right in the best interest of the patient according, if they don't agree to a referral, they won't agree to a referral. But I would hope that they would agree with the patient that, hey, it's easier for me to go see this other doctor. It's less expensive with this doctor, and I can't afford it. I want to pay less for it. So I would hope that could be worked out between doctor and patient, but that looks like a way that we can do it regardless of rescheduling or anything. I do want to take public comment. I know we do have a QMP in the room. I know we don't have a QMP on the board, right? We do have a QMP that's going to come with some public comment here. So I would like to hear from him. But first, do we have anyone online who's either signed on the form or raised their hand? Okay. Mr. Pickett, floor is yours, sir. Make sure to introduce yourself and who you're affiliated.
My name is Tim Pickett. I'm a QMP, and I'm the CEO of Kindly MD. We take care of 20% of the Utah cannabis patients in Utah, 15,000 active patients. I'll give you two examples, and I come down on option number 3 here, not option number 1 or number 2. I'm in opposition to the way this has been proposed, and I'll give you two examples. A Schedule 2 medication, Percocet, and a Schedule 3 medication, testosterone. Percocet is not written telemedicine on a first visit. It's unsafe. It's a Schedule 2. We just don't do it. COVID or not, we just didn't do it. A Schedule 3 medication, testosterone, we just don't, it is not the standard of care to write a testosterone prescription for a patient that you haven't seen and examined in person. So it is not the standard of practice in Utah. To what you said in the beginning, it wasn't quite accurate. We wanted this program to be medical, but that we don't write prescriptions for new patients telemedicine. We see them, and then we write refills for the medications with telemedicine. That's the standard. So I would be opposed to it in that regard. Now, on the third part of this, we have been fighting for years to work as a practice, because if I have a partner that goes on maternity leave, I cannot renew their patient, even though I have access to their chart. I can contact the provider who did the recommendation because of the way the law is written. So we would approve a solution to the issue, but we don't approve of this solution. We would be against this particular solution. And I'd be happy to.
Oops, your time is up.
Yeah, thanks. I don't think so, unless there was any questions that were offered.
All right, with no other public comment, it doesn't look like we can bring it back to the board for action. I will say, despite what we just heard, the guidance from the DEA is still that it would allow you to see a doctor in person the first time, for that doctor then to refer you to a new practitioner. And as it says, all prescription can be prescribed via telehealth. So I do believe there is an option per the DEA for us to allow telehealth renewals upon a referral from another doctor. And I think that that's the position that, you know, that I would take. I just don't want to find more reasons to lose more patients from this program. We're fighting for them every single day. And it's difficult when you're telling, you know, you have a QMP saying, well, I promote the idea of patients being able to transfer from doctor to doctor in my clinic, and then do a telehealth renewal with them. You know what I mean? But no, if I refer them to someone else, maybe I don't. Like, I just think, I wonder where we draw the line. So I'm in support of the idea of being able to change doctors within a clinic and see them via telehealth. I'm also in support of the idea of a referral from one QMP to another to allow that patient to be seen via telehealth. And of course, if you don't feel comfortable making a referral, then it still will require the patient, right, to go and see a new QMP in person. It doesn't remove forever the option of a patient having to go see a new QMP in person. It would just give the current QMP the ability to refer a patient to another clinic so they could be seen via telehealth for a variety of reasons. If they didn't feel comfortable doing it, they wouldn't have to. So this doesn't handcuff really anyone, right? It just says there's some option. So I would be in favor of allowing you to switch doctors within a current clinic and via telehealth. And I also would be in favor of the referral option that I've spoken to as well. But happy to hear from
Which,
from
for
any-
clarification, isn't that the same as option 3 that you were mentioning, or how does that differ from your option 3? It's
Would-
essentially saying the same thing. Yeah, okay.
Essentially
Great.
referral, right?
Yeah,
So basically, if there's a referral, either within your clinic or to another QMP, or are you just saying within your clinic?
It would essentially be the same thing, right? Because it would
Yeah.
be that my colleague
yes.
referred, you know, verbally or written. Referred that patient to me, I guess.
Correct.
Technically.
So if the patient comes to you as a renewing patient on a referral, then you would be able to see them via telehealth, whether in your own clinic or a traditional kind of clinic to clinic or doctor to doctor referral.
Speaking of the standard of care that I practice under, I would not see a medical cannabis recommendation. Like, I would not do an initial recommendation of medical cannabis unless it was just a terminal patient or the patients that were already like established under the law that I could do an initial recommendation for. I agree with Desiree that a cannabis, a compassionate use for patient would also fall under that category, right? We're gonna do what needs to be done for the patient. Those are low risk patients as far as like abusing the system.
Yes.
If I could keep the risk down, then I would be open to it. But as far as the referral goes, that referral would come from a person or in my clinic. I would do a renewal for a patient who already, because I can see the chart.
Correct.
I can talk to the provider. That's the standard of care. And I don't have to manage that patient long-term. I'll also add that. I don't take referrals from my partners and manage those patients forever. I manage those patients while they're out and I give them back. So it is slightly different in that regard. The other thing I would like to add, if I could have maybe 30 more seconds, is we accept Select Health, Medicare, and Cigna to do medical cannabis recommendations now. And that standard of care is, there is a difference between cannabis and normal medicine, right? So we have to abide by those standards of care, that act that you referenced. Right, if we're gonna get reimbursed by Medicare, I have to follow those guidelines. So that's, you know, I'm not gonna recommend cannabis to a patient I haven't seen, because I haven't done it.
But is that more of your decision as a provider? Because if we make it in the statute, if our recommendation says it's a may, not a shall, that still gives you the ability to say, I don't do it this way.
Yes.
But are you saying that it's outside the standard of care to see a patient in person and refer them to another provider not in your clinic, and for that provider to see them via telehealth? Is that outside the standard of care?
And recommend a medication such as this, yes.
So you disagree with the guidance that the DA has put out? Just a question.
For a scheduled medication, the DEA will not allow me to write a scheduled medication for longer than 30 days under a telemedicine initial visit.
It just, this says, have I, so there's a decision tree, right? So patient at the top. And this was provided to us by Mr. Oborn. I also found this myself, and this is consistent with what my understanding is. But again, I'm just a lawyer, man. I don't do this for a living, right? I'm just reading what I find on the internet. It says, have I seen another medical practitioner in person who referred me to a new medical practitioner? If so, all prescriptions can be prescribed via telehealth. So that's what I'm saying is it would benefit you in the sense of, I want to, you know, there's times where, hey, one of my providers is not in office, or they had to go somewhere on an emergency and someone needs to have their card renewed. Well, now if they need to see another provider within my clinic, they have to come in person. What you're wanting is in that instance to be able to temporarily transfer that patient to you for telehealth purposes upon a referral from your colleague, correct?
Yes.
What I'm saying
Or
is, understood, let me just finish on what you give your chance, right? So, but if it's in the sense of one provider, like you, Tim Pickett, to, I don't know, whoever else, right? Another prescriber down the road, right? Who a patient says, this prescriber is closer to me, this prescriber for one reason or another, whatever it is, this is who I want to be seen by, and they request a referral. You may not be willing to do that, but someone else who would be willing to would be meeting this DA guidance as I've presented, right?
For a limited time.
I only
A
see
limited
that
time meaning.
for Schedule 3,
30
2, 3, or 4.
Yeah. 30 days is the standard.
Okay. Understood. But I'm seeing this in front of me, and this is what I'm going off of for.
It comes down to a risk reward. If you have a 21 to 30-year-old who has a high risk of, some bad effect of the drug versus the 75-year-old who's terminal, who can't get you there, the case is going to be different. But you're going to have to answer. The difference is I have to answer to the DEA. If you change the law, the last thing I'll say is if you change the law in 30 to 60 days, we anticipate the DEA will come out and agree with the Department of Health and Human Services that to reschedule is Schedule 3. At that point, I think we're going to have a clear path to standardizing patient care here that, in our opinion, waiting for probably the best option. Understood.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question to Tim that's slightly irrelevant, but not necessarily?
Don't ever say that, because then you can't ask the question.
Okay, so it's totally relevant and I stand by my question. Hey, Tim, if you are taking Medicaid, Medicare, that's super awesome. Are you charging a cost above that? Or do you just, you see them basically, for them, it's free and you charge Medicaid?
There is, we do charge an annual fee of $25 for the administration of the card, because we've had to build and administer a pretty significant system to navigate the EVS, because we are not subject to the patient cap issue. And so we're working with the Department of Health and Human Services to work with that. Like, that system is costing quite a bit of administrative burden. And so currently we charge a $25 outside fee. That's once a year. So out of pocket, there are copay and then a $25 annual fee.
Awesome.
From what patients. So we are solving, I mean, here's the soapbox. We're solving the cost problem in that way.
Sweet. Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, anything else from the board or from anyone at the table? Okay. Oh, Richard,
Just
go ahead.
really quick, I suppose one option would be to mirror what we're to recommend that if the DEA were to schedule it as a 3, and mirror that. Whatever the DEA does, that we would allow for medical cannabis here in Utah. But we would have to wait for what the DEA does. It would be
Yeah.
dependent upon the DEA taking action, right?
But we could
That would
also-
keep it consistent.
Yeah, but we could also recommend that we match what the current DEA guidance is as well, right? Across all categories of
Yeah,
drugs too,
I
equally
think-
as likely, right?
I think an important step though is to confirm
Yes.
where you're getting that information, just for sake of, we've got someone who understands it just a little bit differently.
Certainly. I mean,
Yeah,
this is just my understanding, I mean, from
Right.
DEA.gov.
right.
So,
And in the discussions I've had with other qualified medical providers, they iterated the 30-day limit as well, so it would
Which I-
need to be clarified.
Yeah, which I do see that. I would love to have this clarified because I would love to know this.
Yeah.
Because it does say, if we go over the next category over,
Sure.
it does say, I've not seen a medical practitioner in person. I need a schedule 3, 4, or 5 medication, or it says a couple of others, right? It says that can be prescribed for telehealth via 30 days, and then a refill after that does require it. So, but there's still the idea of the referral, you know,
Yeah.
as well. So it might be that this is something that we need to table to next month. But I see a path forward here that I think is in the best interest of patients. That, you know, would require a simple referral from one QMP to another, whether that's in the
Mhm.
clinic or whether that's from clinic to clinic or QMP to QMP. If this has changed and this is no longer good information, happy to be, you know, corrected. You know, but I do think that this is worth continuing to explore for patients, because we do hear from patients, this is just another hoop that they, you know, they feel is unnecessary. And we have not heard from our patient, you know, on the board. Do you have any input on this, Nanette? Don't mean to put you on the spot if you don't know what it is.
Yeah, no, not really, I don't. Yeah, so I don't want to take more time.
Okay, well, willing to hear a motion on this, if anyone has one.
I wrote a motion.
You wrote one? You want to make it?
I mean,
Yeah.
Go ahead, Matt.
I think it
Give it
fits
a
with
try.
what we looked at, and so now I'm gonna move, I recommend a motion that we move to recommend that an active medical cannabis patient can renew their medical cannabis card with any QMP, qualified medical practitioner via telehealth, providing they receive a referral from the recommending provider.
Just a
Yeah, go ahead,
question
clarify.
on that. So when we say referral, that requires the naming of a specific QMP, right? But not sharing of any treatment information
Yeah.
about that individual. Because what was described in kindly is if it's within the same clinic,
Yeah.
they all get access to the same records, right?
They have it.
But if you're recommending outside your clinic, that treatment information, the vitals that were collected during that original appointment, there's no guarantee they're going.
They're sending.
All that's guaranteed is that the patient is being referred, right? And I believe sometimes they do submit that information in a secure manner to the outside clinic. That happens sometimes, especially with specialty conditions, I would assume.
Yeah.
Especially with those. But I don't think that happens often with medical cannabis. So just
But
to
that's
keep in
something that's
mind.
probably already happening, right? With patients going from one clinic to another. from
Right.
one QMP to another. That's not something that would be a net new, right? That there wouldn't be necessarily that sharing of information. That's just something to consider that would.
Yeah,
be
and
happening.
Sorry, do you know in EVS, it has the patient data of what they've purchased over the card.
Right.
If they're switching providers, how quick does the new provider have access to the patient's information?
After the recommendation that's in here,
Would you be able to see that during the telehealth?
not until after I recommended the patient.
So it's been paid.
Yeah.
Is that-
Policy recommendation and
Got it.
payment of the thing is not free.
Okay.
Is that-
Anybody set the application, sorry.
Is that standard of care, or is that just the way it's currently designed?
It's the way it's currently designed. However, if any other medication I want, I can call the pharmacy and I can just download that. In fact, I have an electronic system that I can download the prescription history from an electronic database. prior to prescribing the medication. The controlled substance database will also give you access to certain information that they did have a card in the past. Pre.
And I guess then that's a question for either you, Rich, or for Brandon and Cody. The new version of EVS, is this something that's being taken into consideration, knowing that patients are routinely switching QMPs to allow that access prior to them making the payment and becoming that QMP's patient? So the QMP can, even if they go in person, right? Even this is in person, I imagine it's the same way, right? You can't see it until they become your patient, right? That seems like a logistical issue.
So it's changing in the new software. Because what the current law requires and that we are going to incorporate into the new software is the ability for a clinic to be able to have access to this patient renewal application and to assist the patient in initiating that renewal application. And in order to initiate that renewal, they need access to the application of someone that they have not met with before. So that is being built in the new software. It's something we're concerned about because you can think of the major increase in access. Every QMP and QMP proxy will have access to every single application for a medical cannabis card, not just the ones that they're assigned to, because they need to be able to assist the patients. So dramatic increase in security concern because of that. Also something that we will see is any medical provider outside of the program will be able to access in the new system information about not just the medical cannabis card in the controlled substance database, but also the products that were purchased, the purchase history of that patient. And they'll be able to see some basics about the products they bought, the frequency which they purchased those products. The current law allows for that access, but the capability has not been built in the controlled substance database yet. But all prescribers will have access to that in the new software. That's a very complicated project, but it's allowed under state law that we're working on.
So whether from a controlled substance database perspective or the new, I guess, new version of EVS, as we can call it, that type of access will be, a doctor can have access to it, QMP can have access to that before they see the patient, right? Or as they're seeing the patient,
right?
Whether via telehealth or whether we voted for a telehealth option or stuck with the in-person option, right? That kind of prior knowledge of a patient before they treat the patient or see the patient, they'll be able to gain access to that.
Yeah, and what they will always have access to is information about the products purchased in the past. What is my understanding is very rare is that a provider will upload treatment information or medication history of the patient in the EVS, so the next provider can see it. That happens very rarely. It takes more time to do that, but it happens. And I don't, Tim could speak to that, but the majority of cases do not include treatment information and medication history of the patient. The law does not require that. It allows for it, but it does not require it.
So essentially they'd be getting whatever is in EVS.
Yes.
Regardless, if some provider puts more in or some provider puts less in, they would still get that same information that they would get up front.
Right.
Instead of after that person becomes the patient.
Yeah, but a potential parameter in all this would be the referral can only happen to an outside clinic if it includes a sharing of basic treatment information, vital treatment records in the EVS. And that would make it possible. I'm just listing that as a potential parameter that you wouldn't be able to refer unless that happened. Now, that's not required in the current, in like regular medical practice. People refer all the time and they don't share records, right? But there are some some health systems do participate in, I forget what it's called, but it's that they share medical records between health systems, and some participate in that, some don't. Some clinics use it, some don't. So, but it is it's a possibility in the regular medical practice, for sharing of that. But the patient has to authorize that to happen, right?
Yeah, to sign a release.
So, yeah, I just wanted to mention that requirement of uploading information, basic information about the treatment. That would be a potential amendment to this proposal that would help that new provider know more about the patient prior to meeting with them. And it would make it so there's two witnesses to what's happening, right? Instead of just the patient or the provider relying entirely on what they're hearing from the patient. And, you know, Tim could speak to that if he chooses to, if you want to take the time now or at another meeting.
Yeah, I think.
Knowing that information, I want to make a motion to remove my motion. I just think at this point, I mean, not having a QMP member on our board.
Yes.
They're gonna give their specific input, and this is something that, I mean, this should help them, right? I mean, this is more of a help rather than we're gonna be limiting them. It gives them access to potentially more medical cannabis patients. But I think if we can get, what does that look like in the future? I think as much information as the new qualifying medical provider can get.
So is your motion, just table it?
Yeah, I think we just table it at this point.
Okay, go ahead and make the motion.
Make a motion, we table this until next month.
I would second that.
All right, we have a motion to table the telehealth renewals to January, and we have a second. Mr. Lee, go ahead and take the roll call vote.
Nanette Beresky.
Yay.
Desiree Hennessy.
Yes.
Jason Higgs.
Yes.
JD Rosen.
Yes.
Matthew Page.
Yes.
Misty Smith.
Yes.
Ken Anderson.
Yes.
Stable motions are going through unanimously. All right. I would like to at least turn for a minute or two to the last item on the agenda. I don't think we're gonna have the ability to get through it this month. But it will be the first like departmental item on the agenda for next month. The reason, I know Justin may still be on, but this is something that's been brought in front of the Utah Cannabis Association before. I'm sure most folks at this table, at least the folks down on that end of the table, at least maybe at this end of that end of the table, have heard about this before, right? It is the one license that is not limited here in Utah. We have heard expressions from really independent processors about this as an issue. And so we wanted to bring it in front of the board as well to talk about what type of cap, if any, we place on processing licenses. Does that just apply to independent processors? Does that apply to, how does that apply to someone who has a cultivation, which I don't think there's anyone that doesn't yet have a processing license, but if we had something in the future whereby we did issue additional cultivation licenses, would that cap apply to those vertical operators? Would this apply to pharmacy owners who may also want to be a processor? So I think there's some stuff to unpackage here, and we're already a minute over time. And I think that this would be better saved for next month. So with those things in mind, maybe we rework the memo a little bit to address those things. I encourage you to reach out to both independent and vertical processors, as well as, don't we have two newish processors? Dancing Bees and then whatever West Med. Were they conditionally approved? All right, I think if you feel the need, you can talk to them as well, but let's make sure we're at least getting both sides of the coin here for next month. Next month, we will have that as an agenda item. The two things we tabled this month. We also will be bringing in front of the board the idea of UDAF providing cannabis from local producers to the research center at the University of Utah. And I'm excited about that. No more of that stuff from that farm in Mississippi. Which interestingly provided the first medical cannabis patient in America, all of his cannabis until it was revoked. So I think something interesting, and the initial qualifying condition was glaucoma. So I find that very interesting as well. That's a little history lesson as we roll out today. Appreciate everyone. I know we've only had a few meetings, but it is Christmas time. I do want to wish everyone a happy holiday. I do appreciate everyone's input. We are tackling real substantive issues. And I appreciate everybody. Have a happy holiday. We will see you back here in January. And as always, if you have issues that you would like put on the agenda, an email to myself or the MCPAB email is the easiest way to do that. So Jimmy, Kent, anyone, or 2 new members when they join. If you have anything, please put it forth to us and it will make it on the agenda. And just a reminder, we may need to be flexible in January and February about maybe having additional meetings, in addition to the one that we have, but more to come there. And yeah, happy holidays, everybody. And with that, I will take the most popular motion of the day.
Move to adjourn.
Motion is not debatable. It's approved unanimously. I can tell you.
You know, it's like, I emailed you.